you guys had a chance to look those over or not. Can I have your attention, please? Welcome to the February 5th, 2007 Lowell Planning Board meeting. First matter on the agenda is acceptance of minutes from November 20th, 2006. Did all planning board members have an opportunity to review those minutes? If so, any questions or concerns?
Mr. Chairman, I had one comment on the minutes. Sure. I was just talking with James, and I found them to be incredibly detailed, which I guess is a good thing. It's almost like a transcript. However, you know, given the time constraints with which we're asking the planning department to turn this around on, I thought that they could be a little less detailed, especially since we have the video at our disposal as well to get exact comments and that sort of thing. You know, I think a summary, key points, and motions and conclusions would be sufficient in my estimation. Anyway, I thought they were great, but I know you have a hard time turning around with all the other things you have to do, and I didn't think we needed quite that much detail.
Thank you. Any corrections that anybody feels necessary? Did you notice any corrections, Steve, or anything that should be omitted or added?
No, I'd move approval.
Okay.
I'll second.
All members in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye. Aye. I was not present at that meeting, so I will abstain from accepting those minutes since I was absent at that meeting. Okay, moving along, we have two public hearings tonight. The first public hearing is a site plan and a special permit review, which is 1975-1995 Middlesex Street, Millview Estates. The Lowell Planning Board will review an application by Millview Estates, LLC, and Clara Simmons Associates, Inc., for a project located at 1975-1995 Middlesex Street in Lowell. The proposal includes the modification of a plan previously approved by the Planning Board in July 2005, which consists of converting an existing mill building into 54 residential units and constructing a 50-unit multifamily building and 38 townhouse-style units on the site. The new proposal includes the demolition of the existing mill building and the construction of a total of 74 townhouse-style units on site, with associated required landscaping and parking. The project site is roughly 220,000 square feet in size and is located in the suburban neighborhood mixed-use zoning district. Special permit review is required under Article 12, Table of Uses, and site plan review is required under Section 11.4 of the Lowell zoning ordinance. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
Curtis and 144 Merrimack Street, Lowell. I'm here on behalf of my client, Millview Estates, LLC, representing my client in regards to this modification plan that is before you. This plan, as you indicated, was approved last July of 2005 for the construction of townhouses and the renovation of an existing mill building at 1975 Middlesex Street. We did commence construction of the townhouses. We have basically put up 19 townhouses in the first 3 phases, of which 13 are owner-occupied at this time. After going through extensive research with the architect, Mr. Sullivan, who is here tonight, and also structural engineers, it was determined that that existing mill building structurally is probably not going to be feasible. And we're looking now to reduce the number of units from the 132 that were proposed back in July of 2005 down to 74 units, all of those units being townhouse units. We feel it's going to be a much better project. We were hoping at one time that that mill could be used, but after reviewing it with experts, it's going to be difficult. The other, without the mill building, the other structure that was proposed back in 2005 was the addition of a brand new building housing, I think it was 50 units or 38 units, and we feel aesthetically and the way the development is coming along and the people that have viewed the development that a complete uniform-type townhouse development would benefit the area, would, you know, from a planning board perspective, reducing the number of cars coming in and out of that development substantially with having fewer units, having a large green area, having more snow storage area, more visitor parking area. We're trying to improve the development, so it's going to be pleasing for all the neighbors and also for the city. At this time, I could have Alberto Galla from Galla and Associates can explain some of the ins and outs of how the changes can be compared to what was there. He has a couple of drawings, and I'll turn the microphone over to him.
Hello? Okay. This is our plan, as Attorney Curtis was saying. This is the 74-unit project, all townhouse-style condominiums. A portion of the buildings were already built, and it's mostly this first phase of construction. For orientation, I brought the old plan, actually the original plan that was approved in 2005, and it shows the existing mill building in this location, and behind it a proposed 38-unit building this over here. 38 units, townhouses in this location. Basically, once we found that the old mill building was not going to be used for units, we basically took the basic idea that we had on this side and extended it to the other side, still keeping two means of egress to the project, and with a potential connection to further property in the town of Chelmsford. So this is the same as the original project. This was the area that was changed, mostly in this vicinity here. The buildings consist of 5, 4, some 3-unit buildings. Basically allows the construction of phases through the project. So this might take a little bit longer to build, but it's also a more steady growth project. You can see the green area is more extensive than before. We do meet all the zoning requirements, and we feel this is a project that will be valuable for this area. So that's basically it.
While you're there, could you just show me what's existing there now that's already been developed on your plan that's in front of us? The ones that have been built to date?
Yes, these 3 I believe are built, plus these 3 in the back.
Okay. Anybody else with the applicant likes to speak? Mr. Curtis, do you have anybody else with you who'd like to speak?
Yes. James Sullivan is here, the architect, and I passed out 2 letters, one from Mr. Sullivan and also one from the structural engineer that was hired to review this. So I'll let Mr. Sullivan speak in regards to the integrity of that mill building.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Jack Sullivan. I'm an architect with Gavin Sullivan Architects here in Lowell, Mass. Once we get into analyzing the existing mill building, a couple of issues came up. My structural engineer has come up that this existing building right now, as we speak, is in a mode of structural failure. It's really gone beyond a reasonable point of repair. And also, as the architect looking at the entire development, you know, the mill building itself would be out of scale, being in such close proximity to the existing townhouses that are already being built. So it's just not practical or feasible for us to continue this in this fashion that was approved. And also, I guess we are asking for a reduction of almost 50 units. And I think it would be a much better design if it was approved that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
I'd like to add a comment that coming from Wood Street at the intersection of Middlesex, where we head up towards where this project is, it's mostly either apartments or condominiums. There is some residential on Middlesex Street, but the only mill building, or the only existing mill building, is this building in the site. You have to go all the way up into North Chelmsford down to find the next set of mill buildings, almost up to Vinyl Square. You know, the mill, it was perceived that we could do something with it to develop it, but at this point, I think it makes more sense, after speaking with my client and with the architect, that in view of what has comprised the new construction, and looking at the new construction in relation to that big monstrosity that's still there, it really does hinder the look of the development, and I think the fact that we're reducing it by quite a few units, we're taking a little bit of a burden off the city with regards to services and schools and everything else that would involve 132 units as opposed to 74 units total. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Anybody else here like to speak in favor of the project? Yes, sir. If you come to the microphone, just state your name and address. I'd appreciate it.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Walter Green. I live at 1975 Middlesex Street. I am a resident of the Millview Estates. When notified of this change, I met with the developers and their representatives. And they have been consistent all along, and they have answered all my questions as far as parking, style of townhouse, and type of structure that's going to be up there. They have more than kept up their end of the bargain as far as commitment to the project and to the residents, and I see no reason why they will change now. I am solely behind this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak in favor? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Moses. I live at 1961 Middlesex Street. I'm a trustee of the Riverside Townhouse Association. We are the only abutters in Lowell who are directly contiguous to the property at 1975-1995 Middlesex Street. I'm here to support Mr. Kazanjian's application to modify the Plan First property that had been previously approved by the Planning Board in July 2005. Mr. Kazanjian's development is an enhancement to the neighborhood, a good use of the land, and an addition to the quality housing stock available for prospective home buyers. The type of community that is proposed could well serve as a model for the other property on Middlesex Street, for which plans were submitted and then appropriately rejected by this board. When the Planning Board initially considered the Millview Estates project, our association opposed the approval of the application because of our concern with the quality of life. Specifically, we were concerned with the destruction of an existing visual barrier between the properties. Mr. Kazanjian indicated at that time that he would see to it that as many trees as possible were preserved. He kept his word and at some expense saved several trees. Unfortunately, the closeness of buildings to the property line did not permit saving a sufficient visual barrier. Our original concern of privacy remains. In speaking with Mr. Kazanjian prior to this hearing, he has expressed his willingness to construct a vinyl fence to deal with the privacy issue. We are thus requesting that the height of a spite fence be waived so that a fence of a sufficient height to ensure privacy may be erected. Prior to approval of the current plan, our association advocated that the plan originally submitted by the developer be built in its mirror image. We made that request because of the very close proximity of the proposed buildings to our existing buildings. Our proposal would have had the parking area located next to our property line rather than the buildings. We were told by the developer that this was not possible because the parking area had to adjoin the mill building. Well, it's a year and a half later. We're here and the developer's buildings have been constructed. Our residents are indeed now eyeball to eyeball with the new residents. And our question is, why should we have to sacrifice our privacy for the developer's poor planning and consequent request tonight to modify the plan? The mill building will be gone, and the reason for not being able to construct a mirror image or other alternative no longer exists. Our development has thus suffered now irreparable harm as a result of the poor planning. Additionally, when the Planning Board approved that plan in July of 2005, the board took the unusual step of allowing the back of the residences to face Middlesex Street. The same is true along our property line. The rears of the buildings face our property. This should not have been permitted. The Department of Planning and Development did not recommend it, and we know of nowhere else in Lowell where this approach has been allowed. In short, it was a mistake. One of the consequences of that decision is a brick wall that serves as an obstruction to a complete view for traffic exiting one of the 2 driveways for Millview Estates. Actually, there are 2 brick walls. One is the long brick wall that was discussed and approved. There is a second brick wall, which is a continuation of the longer wall, which is constructed in the direction of our property, with the driveway situated in between the 2 walls. An unobstructed view of the street is obstructed by the wall. A driver does not have an unobstructed view of the street until he or she reaches the sidewalk area. Similarly, drivers exiting our development cannot see drivers exiting the nearby Millview Estates driveway because of the brick wall is blocking a view of the exiting vehicles. From our driveway, the Millview Estates driveway has become a hidden driveway. This is a picture of the smaller brick wall, which I don't know if they were in the original plans, but it exists as a continuation, essentially, of the brick wall that was originally approved by the planning board. In addition, this is the view that we receive when we drive out of our townhouse community. The brick wall essentially serves as an obstruction to our seeing the drivers coming out of their development. It's a hidden driveway, and as I indicated, their drivers really cannot see until they get to the sidewalk. We do not want to see any automobile accidents occurring because of a lack of an unobstructed view by drivers exiting either Millview Estates or Riverside Townhouses. We are asking the planning board in its approval of the modification of the plan that the driveway nearest our property be limited to incoming vehicles and the driveway closest to the Chelmsford line be used for vehicles exiting Millview Estates, creating in effect a racetrack pattern. A further consideration is the appearance of the buildings. On the plans, the front of the buildings have a nice appearance. If you look at the plans, in fact, that are seated right there, could you hold those up, please? You'll see in black and white, those are very nice buildings. Thank you. Unfortunately, each building is gray. It has a very institutional look. So a really nice architectural plan has been harmed by the fact that there's really no variation, and we're going to have 74 of those buildings. Something should be done by the planning board to see that that not be the final case, despite the fact that the building's exteriors are nice exteriors. In summary, we congratulate Mr. Gazanji on constructing a quality development that will enhance the neighborhood. At the same time, we're asking that the planning board, 1, address the issue of the fence that has been agreed to. 2, the issue of restricting the driveways to a racetrack pattern so as to overcome the existence of the brick wall visual obstruction. 3, the concern regarding the exterior appearance of the buildings. And 4, recall the initial discussions about this property with regard to drainage from this property and how the modified plans address that issue. While we are recommending that the planning board approve the requested modification, we are also requesting that the approval be delayed until a subsequent meeting of the planning board where any modifications to the exteriors of the buildings can be reviewed together with addressing the other concerns. There is one more comment we wish to add. Each member of our Board of Trustees works during the day. Nobody was available to go to the Division of Planning and Development to review the plans for modifications that were submitted for this application. We would urge the Lowell Planning Board and the city that as soon as it can be done, that application plans that are submitted to the Lowell Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Conservation Commission be put on the Department of Planning and Development internet website so that abutters and the general public may have ready access to these materials. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, sir.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just to briefly go over a couple of those issues.
Let me just stop you there, Mr. Curtis, and see who else wants to speak before I hear back from you, okay? Let me, maybe there might be some other issues that okay. Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anyone else in favor? Okay, Mr. Curtis, I'll hear from you before we turn it over to the opposition.
Yeah, just in regards to the fencing issue, we had discussed that we're not opposed to a fence being installed between the 2 properties. When this property was designed, everybody had an opportunity to come before this board to review it and to see what the sketches were like and how these buildings normally would face into each other and not out towards the roadway. You only have one roadway here, Middlesex Street. But in installing a fence, we're opposed to a vinyl-style fence. Aesthetically, we don't think they do anything for the project. We want to put in the cedar-type fencing, which would naturally weather and look good in the relation to the trees and the shrubbery that are already there, that would weather over the course of time, and that some people have questions with that about the fact that it may have problems with the posts, but we're looking to put in metal posts with to attach the stockade-style cedar fence and wood fence, rather than that sort of shiny plastic that when headlights hit it and everything else hits it, it sort of shines back on you if you've ever driven down some neighborhoods with this plastic fencing that's up in front of people's homes. With regards to driveway, I mean, I personally have been in that site several hundred times, and I've never experienced any problem trying to come out of the Millview Estate driveway to see. You're basically at the bend in Middlesex Street at that point. When you come out to the point where the sidewalk, even prior to the sidewalk, you can see all the way down Middlesex Street towards Wood Street, and you can look all the way up the other way, probably almost a quarter of a mile, I would imagine. And there's not an issue there. I also drove into the neighbor's condominium complex, and coming out of that complex looking, I did not see any issue with problems of visual because of the walls that were put up. The brick walls were put up, and everybody seems to be happy with those to give the people that have the backyards a little bit of privacy that face Middlesex Street, but also to try to develop what they call a racetrack pattern. I think there's a safety issue there, because now you're forcing people in one way, go all the way through the project, and come out another way. So, if you're living on the right side of this development, you're not going to be going in on the left side and have to drive all the way through. I think there's a safety concern there, trying to make it a one-way in, one-way out. As for the color of the buildings, I'm sure, you can give some input on that, but it's a nice-looking development with different characteristics of the building shapes and sizes in the fronts, and it's very, very appealing to most people that have been out there to view it. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point in time, I'll see if anybody else want to speak in favor? In favor? Yes. Sure.
My name is Scott Casper. I live at 189 Middlesex Street.
What's your last name, Scott? I'm sorry.
What's that?
What's your last name? I'm sorry.
Scott Casper,
Thank you, Scott.
C-A-S-P-E-R.
Okay.
I believe right now I'm looking around, the only resident from North Chelmsford here, and I live directly across the street from the development. And my concern right now is living there for 9 years and looking at this old disgusting Duso box company. I did hear that you were going into Chelmsford quite a bit, but I'm curious how much of this old rundown building of the Duso box is going to be converted into something other than what's there now. I'm not opposed to the plan right now, but I'm not in favor of the plan. I'm just here to figure out exactly how much of my visual from my front door is going to be affected. But I do agree with Mr. Moses, that it's a nice-looking property. I think he did a good job. I'm not opposed to the brick fence. I know what he's talking about, coming in and out of the property after living right across the street. Again, I'm not opposed or against, but I would like to know how much of it is going to move into North Chelmsford from Lowell. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on that, Mr. Curtis? Sure.
Yes, I could address that. The old Duso box building is basically the addition that is to the left of the existing mill building. That's coming down completely. And that was the intent even from the 2005 approval. That was the old addition. It's not a brick building. It's an old wooden structure. It's been added on over many years. But that's coming down completely. We're not doing any building in Chelmsford. Part of that Duso box addition building is located in Chelmsford, and we will be seeking a demolition permit from the town of Chelmsford to take down that small portion that does encroach over the line. But that old Duso box building is coming down completely. That's not going to be an issue.
Thank you.
Could I ask you,
opportunity to briefly respond to the attorney?
Sure.
He mentioned the white vinyl fence, which I had spoken to the developer about, and we thought we had agreement on that. So I want the board to be aware of that. But with regard to to a stockade fence, we've had experience with the stockade fence. There are large maintenance issues with a stockade fence. We don't want to see in the years to come a problem between our condominium association and the condominium association at Millview Estates in terms of trying to maintain the fence. In addition, on this picture, you can see that actually white vinyl is being used in that development to separate patios. So in terms of saying that white vinyl is not part of a plan that's consistent with that development, I think is simply not the case. And I would hope that the planning board would either visit the property or whatever, because of the fact that we're the folks who are being impacted by the poor planning of not having the mill considered. And now there's sort of a modification. The buildings are in the ground. We're the people seeing it face to face. And the least we can do is to have a fence that separates us from being eyeball to eyeball. And I don't see a reason why the developer should be opposed to this.
Well, just to let you know, Mr. Moses, I know the planning board members have been up there. I was there yesterday. Other planning board members have been up there over the weekend. So to let you know that you wish we'd go visit the site, I can tell you, we've been there. And we've been there this weekend. I was there yesterday. I know my other planning board members I spoke with prior to tonight's meeting, they also told me the same thing. They've been up there over the weekend. So to answer your concerns, we have been up there and we looked at the project. So we usually make it a custom, most planning board members, to go up to all sites. We did go up and looked at the site. I was there yesterday. And usually when a project comes before us, most all of us planning board members try to get there. Okay. You said you'd like us to go visit the site? I was there yesterday. I was there, other planning board members, we've been there over the weekend. You're welcome. Okay. Anybody else like to speak in favor? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that part of the portion of the hearing, the public hearing is closed. At this point in time, anybody like to speak in opposition?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening. My name is Michael S. Reddy. I reside at 130 Nesmith Street. I come before you this evening as an independent activist for the preservation of Lowell's neighborhood architecture and character. I oppose the site plan approval and issuance of a special permit under Article 7 and as is governed under Section 11.3 of the Lowell Zoning Code, as it will result in the demolition of the existing 19th century mill building that currently occupies this site. In July of 2005, Millview Estates LLC, of whom the principal is Alan Kazanjian, was issued the present build-out plan, and in doing so, Mr. Kazanjian agreed to embrace what is known as Section 8.1 of Lowell Zoning Code. This is a section that was passed on to us and is of great benefit to we preservationists. This project was about as good as it can go by bringing in new and integrating the old. It is the ultimate in reuse both in the land area and in the existing buildings. Section 8.1 facilitates, it provides incentives to developers to help us preserve. This mill building is a very pertinent piece of Lowell's industrial heritage. My understanding, speaking to a 92-year-old resident who has lived there from birth in that area, in Middlesex Village, is that it was a furniture mill. She owns furniture that was made in that mill. For clarity and for those who are viewing on TV, I'd like to read 8.1. I think it says everything. 8.1.1. The purpose of this provision shall be to promote the preservation and significant historic buildings and neighborhood landmarks, thereby enhancing the community's appearance and extending our common architectural legacy for future generations. The intent of this provision shall be to enable such buildings to be adapted to new use requirements while exerting strict control over the preservation of all exterior features. This provision is designed to encourage the adaptive reuse of such buildings, where such reuse would more effectively promote, preserve, and enhance the architectural character of surrounding neighborhood than would the redevelopment of the site following the demolition of these landmark structures. Mr. Kazanjian was just more than eager to embrace this a year and a half ago. Lowell's motto is the Mill City. That placard that is so intricately carved above your heads features a mill. Lowell's medallion depicts the mill. The Mill City is losing mills at a record pace, and it is being facilitated by the very tool that was meant to help facilitate the preservation of these mills and hence neighborhood character. Mr. Kazanjian's engineer just stated that a obviously more recent structural analysis of this building has pointed out that it is structurally inferior now all of a sudden a year later. My opinion is that it has nothing to do with a change in any structural character of the building, that it is purely financial. Everybody knows that we are, in my opinion, at the beginning of what could be a major collapse in condo and residential real estate prices in New England. So why was it structurally feasible a year and a half ago and not now? But before I go on, I'd like to request that this board terminate this evening's review due to nonconformance with Section 1139, notification of application before planning board. The applicant has not posted a sign in accordance with Article 6, at least as far as I could tell, and in accordance with discussions with residents in and around that development. 632 requires that a sign be posted 14 days before the public hearing. I called the Department of Planning and Development today, and they could not confirm nor deny the existence of this sign. But I was told that if it were there, we would see it. So I believe that right now this developer is not in conformance with our laws. I will read 1139, notification of application before the planning board. At the time of application is filed for a special permit, of which he is here for tonight, and a site plan review, of which he is also before you tonight, or subdivision approval before the Lowell Planning Board. The applicant shall post a sign consistent with the regulations of Article 6, Section 63220 of this ordinance upon the property to notify the public of the application. Such sign must be posted at least 14 days before the public hearing. I've checked the exemptions. This project is not exempt. So I appeal to the chairman to either clarify why this meeting should continue, or, and considering my lack of expertise in the zoning code, to notify me that I'm allowed to move on. If we are going to terminate, I'd rather reserve my further comments for the next meeting.
You may continue.
Pardon me? Okay,
You may continue.
very good. Section 8.1, I noticed in my examination of our zoning code, integrates very closely with Section 11.3, special permits. Section 11.3 says approval of site plan on special permit will run counter to the wish, in my opinion, will run counter to the wishes of the citizens of Lowell, as is detailed in the comprehensive master plan. 11.3.2a, criteria for special permits in the table of uses. Special permit granting authority will only grant a special permit to a project that is consistent with the goals of the City of Lowell comprehensive master plan. A narrative must accompany each applicant, etc. Application to the master plan. How does this project adhere, apply, and promote the goals of the City of Lowell comprehensive to our master plan? Successful project shall identify specific connections to the goals of the master plan. Our master plan, one of the most dominant points of interest and concern on the part of our citizens of Lowell was that neighborhood character be preserved. It's right here. The people who did us the favor of drafting all of this legal information, 8.1, 11.3.2a, obviously saw a need to promote preservation within our neighborhoods. Neighborhood character, 11.3.2ac. How does this project protect and enhance the character of the existing neighborhood? Successful projects should reflect the density, the urban design, the setbacks, height, landscaping elements How does this project provide for social, economic, and community needs? Is the project consistent with the character, materials, and scale of buildings in the vicinity? Does the project minimize the visual intrusion from visible parking, storage, and other outdoor service area viewed from the public ways? And of special interest, 1132AD, does the project minimize obstruction of scenic views? This mill is very tall. It affords a wonderful view, I assume, of the river. To demolish it would run counter to that law. I'm especially concerned about the impact on those residents who have already paid upwards to $300,000 to purchase within this development. 13 units have already been sold. If I were purchasing, personally, the preservation and restoration and reuse of this mill would have played a very important role in my decision to spend what is really a significant amount of money. They purchased with the understanding that the project would feature a restored and reused 19th century furniture mill. They have been deceived, and it is up to their city and this board to protect the interests of all citizens. The running joke in this city is that the Millview Estates, there will be no mill to view. Maybe they should change the name to Sucker's Bet or to Bait and Switch. If demolished, it will expose the project to the blighted and abandoned USO Box Company. I believe, if I heard correctly, that the USO Box Company is not involved in this, included in this development, so it will stay. I would believe that this is very important to the residents who have already purchased. We're talking 13 at approximately $300,000. We've got millions of dollars already invested from citizens of Lowell, both existing and those who maybe came to Lowell. This is also in direct relationship to 1132AD10, which I think let's see here. Project minimize obstruction of views, okay. They take down the mill. Those who paid with the understanding that the mill would be there and beautified will now have to look between the units and have a much different view. This mill, as you might expect, I took a long, hard look at it. It is very significant architecturally. The scale of these 20 over 20 single-pane windows in relation to the overall building facade is enormous. I've never seen a mill building that has such a percentage of light entering the building. It is most impressive. It is obviously that the mill was designed to facilitate maximum light, hence a furniture factory. I build furniture. You need a lot of light. They didn't have light in 1880 that we have today. This site, of all the sites that have been considered for artist loft use, would be extraordinary. Beaverbrook and Drake, I've mentioned it before. Beaverbrook and Drake, it took, I believe, 3 years for Mr. Gorman to have approved. It's beautiful. It should tell everybody of what can be done and what we have inherited here, as I've gone on so many times in Lowell. I've left Lowell for 15 years. You should not have to leave Lowell for 15 years to realize that the people of Lowell have inherited an amazing residential, commercial, and industrial legacy. The cumulative impact of mill conversions, just within this year, 900 Lawrence Street, 8-1 initially, unwound, approved to demolish. 685, 686 Lawrence Street, approved for partial demolition just 2 weeks ago. 500 Lawrence Street, an old stone blacksmith shop with beams this big, approved for demolition by the Lowell City Council. If this board votes to allow for the demolition of this important part of Lowell's industrial heritage, it will have been the third time in only months that Lowell Planning Board has facilitated the destruction of our city's historic legacy. Our planning board, in my opinion, should be doing whatever it takes to preserve our historic legacy. This project application brings to light the glaring conflict of interest that has been allowed to exist in the city. Upon returning here in 2001, I could not believe that the chairman of our Zoning Board of Appeals was allowed to retain this position in light of the fact that he has
Mr. Reddy, I'm
been...
going to stop you right there. I've told you in the past, we can't consider who the applicant is before. You know that, and I know that.
Was that according to the Supreme Court, as you had made clear
Well,
last time?
but no, actually, it's been referred to us for the Ethics Commission, who spoke before this city when we were down in the hall. It's also been explained to us in past city managers. The Ethics Commission has given us a ruling on that.
The Ethics Commission has ruled on that.
Yes, they have. We've spoke with them at a meeting that was held down the mayor's reception room.
Concerning the fact that
Yes.
this individual is allowed to
Yes.
remain seated as an
Yes.
active
Yes,
while being
Yes.
a developer
yes,
and has to come before this board,
yes.
well, then there's something wrong in the city.
Well, then I suggest you speak with the Ethics Commission, because they're meant to make the ruling, not me.
You know, there's been 5 letters to the editor within the 5 years and back talks protesting that. So who's wrong and who's right?
Well, I would go with the Ethics Commission,
Well, let me just say this.
okay?
There's a lot of cynicism toward government. As an activist and somebody who is not a politician, I have the opportunity to hear the truth from people.
Okay, well,
And there
I
is a
suggest you
raging cynicism over this.
I suggest you contact the Ethics Commission who made the ruling.
But I also have an opportunity here, as a public hearing. It's an integral part of our democracy. It's the only component of our democracy that allows the average citizen to take part in our
Well,
governance.
when you talk about the site, yes. When you start getting outside the site, then the answer is no.
That's fine.
Okay.
I thank you.
You're welcome.
So in closing, I'd like to say to each of you, please help us extend our common architectural and historical legacy for future generations of Lowellians by voting no on this application to demolish this historical mill building. Think of the people who have already locked down $3 million+ to live in there. We only had one individual. And again, we didn't have the sign. It's the law. We have to do according to what the board requires. This is the second time in 3 weeks that my attempt to speak has been compromised. And the board. I appeal to you to realize the fact that boards of other cities and states, towns I've lived in throughout this country, do not just focus on quantitative, measured things like frontage. That takes place with building departments and departments of planning and development. We need our boards to realize that subjective criteria, such as impact, cumulative impact, not just individual impact of each project, cumulative. And driving through Lowell, cumulatively, our neighborhoods have been ravaged. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're always very patient with me. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak so freely this evening. As I said, this is very exciting to take part in our governance through this process called the public hearing. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am. State your name and address for the record, if you would, please.
Hi, my name is Kathy McPherson. I live in Unit 10, and I am strongly in opposition of the demolition of the mill. And number one, because it's like bait and switch. I was like, my husband, who is not here, and I'm speaking on his behalf too, we were one of the first residents to move in on, closing at the end of June, and we were told that the mill will be restored, and that, we basically bought it knowing that we would, be at the lower end, and whereas, where they promised the luxury condos in the mill, that we'd be at the lower end. We didn't want to spend a whole lot on a condo, but we wanted, so whenever we were to sell it, it'd have a higher resale value. But now, if it becomes one of what we're already living in, what difference is that going to make? And that's kind of like switching on us whenever we first bought into it, because we were one of the first people who moved in, and that's not really fair to us. I don't know if other, some other residents may feel that way too, but, it's going to decrease our resale value in the end, because we're, you know what I mean? But, so I'm just strongly in opposition of the demolition of the mill. And plus, it's going to bring in a lot more traffic into the area, and we don't want that. And, just the whole flow of it, it's just going to all mess up. And I know I missed the beginning part of it, but I don't know what you guys were talking about. But we're just strongly in opposition of the mill, just because it seems like a bait and switch for us. And we're already locked into it, and we already own it. And we just have to deal with whatever happens. And plus, the mill's a beautiful structure that, or it could become a beautiful structure. And I don't know. You should just give it a chance, and I'm sure a lot of people will buy into it, because it gives character to the whole, to the whole situation. But I know I'm nervous speaking because I've never done this before, but so that's my view.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask you a question, Mrs. McPherson. Excuse me?
Kathy?
Kathy.
Mr.
Can I just
Chairman, I'd like
ask
to
you one
ask you a question,
question?
if you could, please. Thank you.
I was just curious how you found out about this meeting. Were you notified by a notice? Or?
Yep, for certified mail from the city of Lowell.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in opposition? In opposition? In opposition? Nobody else in opposition? That part of the public hearing is closed. At this point in time, I'll turn it over to the board members. Any of the board members want to go first? Steve, you want to go first? Go ahead. Mr. Genman?
Sure, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I'd like to ask one of the developers. Didn't you do this kind of analysis on the mill structure before you came before the board the first time to determine whether or not it was structurally capable of,
I think
doing what you had planned?
I think that was the intent when they originally looked at the site, was to try to preserve that mill building. I think once they got into designing units that would go into that building and making a determination of what it was going to require, they brought in a structural person, and that structural person indicated that that building basically would have to be torn down and rebuilt if you wanted that typical structure, that type of structure on the site. It's just, it's been vacant for probably 15 years or longer. The windows have been out of it long before we purchased the property, and it's suffered a lot of damage. I mean, we know there's mills all over the city that were rebuilt in downtown, and Mr. Reedy talked about 8.11, but I mean, a lot of those units were developed downtown in the mill district. This is a freestanding mill that's out in a residential district with all condominiums and apartment buildings and some residential single-family homes. It's the only structure there. Our intent was to try to keep that building and restore it. It's not even near being feasible. To do that, you would have to take it down to the ground and rebuild it again just the way it is, and it's just not going to work. And we sat down with Matt Coggins on this. We sat down with George Perokis on this. They reviewed these plans and the changes we were proposing, and we had no negative feedback from the City of Planning and Development regarding this proposed change.
So I guess I understand that. My question is, though, I have to imagine that there was some structural analysis that went on this structure before you came before the board the first time in 2005.
I would have to defer to Mr. Sullivan. I think he is the expert. I'm not an expert in that.
Mr. Genman, to answer your question, once we started construction documents on the mill building, we brought our engineers in, and one of the big issues is that we're going to have parking at grade level. The column locations and the masonry openings do not allow for the parking. We would really have to, knock it down to accomplish that.
So you would have to have, your plan was to have parking
Yes,
in the structure
at grade level.
on the first
Yes,
floor?
Yeah.
If you, put parking elsewhere on the site, could you still preserve the building for
Well, that's just the
dwelling
initial. I
units?
mean, the parking's just one of the elements.
Sure.
I mean, to take a mill building, we have to make it comply with seismic laws, earthquake. And our structural engineers just say, this particular building, because of its scale and the deterioration, is really well beyond salvaging it. But to answer your question, the structural review does not happen until construction documents have started. And we started a couple months ago.
Okay. I had a couple other questions regarding parking. Do we know how many parking spots are in the new plan? How many parking spots are on the site?
My name is Paul Simon. I'm the landscape architect working for Gallus Simon Associates. We have 163 required spaces for 74 townhouses. We are providing 216 spaces for those townhouses. And additionally, we have 33 visitor spaces proposed.
All right, that's good. I actually was up there Saturday looking at the site, and I thought the townhouses were very nice, actually. I thought they were attractive and well done interior. The one thing I will note, though, that comes up a lot on this board is you know, they're billed as 2-bedroom units with a loft. Well, that loft is a beautiful bedroom. I think it's not quite completely truthful to call that a loft when it could be a 3rd bedroom, which would have further impact on parking potentially. But it sounds like you've allotted for additional parking, so that's good. That's all I have for right now. The only other thing I will say, this gentleman brought up the issue of the fence, and I would agree with him that I think a vinyl fence is probably, I think it's more attractive. I have, in the back of my yard, I have a cedar fence and I have a vinyl fence, and the cedar fence is a pain to maintain, and the vinyl fence is just, always looks good. So
That's
I
true.
would agree with the residents that the vinyl fence is a better
I
deal.
think that can be worked out. I was just indicating that when a fence goes up, it's going to be owned by the Millview Association. So if that fence in 20 years needs to be repaired, it's going to be Millview Association that will take care of that, not the neighboring complex that is there. I mean,
Sure.
a lot of these developments that were squeezed into small lots in the past, we do abut each other, and some people, they want their privacy. So a fence is the best way to give them both. And if that works, I'm sure we can work out that detail.
Well, I guess that's the point. It is going to be supported by Millview, and that'll cost money. And there'll always be a question of should we spend the money to, paint the fence or upgrade the fence this
Well,
year.
no, it would never
And
be
if it's a vinyl
painted.
fence, I think it's carefree. So
If
I would suggest that that's a better.
That's fine.
That's all I have for now, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fichette, Jerry, any questions, concerns? I'll come back to it. Okay, sure. Rich, you want to go next?
Yeah, I have, excuse me, a few questions.
Sure.
The first being, is this building that's going to be torn down, have you had discussions with the appropriate city personnel regarding its historic significance? Is it an historically significant building?
I don't know that. I don't know the exact date of construction. I know it's probably been there since the early 1900s, but I don't know what the historic significance is of that building, whether we did not have to go to the historic board or there didn't seem to be any indication on that. What's happened is this building was constructed, and then subsequently over the years they constructed these wooden structures next door, which became the old Dusso Box Company, and
Right.
those were constructed any time, I think, from the 40s on, but they're kind of a mishmash of attachments and additions and garages that even from the original application back in 2005, it was approved to have all that portion demolished to make way for a new building.
Okay, so we really don't have,
But I don't know that
we
answer.
don't have an opinion on that. Mr. Gray?
Can you come over to the microphone, please?
Please.
Thank you.
There is no historical significance to it, other than the fact that it's over 50 years old. Other than that, there is nothing that's,
And what do you base your opinion on?
discussions with Steve Stoll.
From the historic board?
Yes.
Okay. I think, all those comments about the history are great, Mr. Reedy, but, we all feel that way, believe me. We want to encourage the reuse of good buildings in this city that'll add to the architectural significance and architectural beauty of Lowell. But in this particular case, I think the historic significance here is in question. And I have two letters in front of me that, one is from, to Mr. Kazanjian from Mr. Sullivan, the architect. He's a registered architect here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, indicating that the building is not structurally sound. And I have another letter from Arthur Rose, who is a registered professional engineer here in the Commonwealth, stating that the building is structurally unsound. I think in this case that I would defer to these experts as to the outcome of what should happen to this building. And again, given the fact that it's not historically significant, I think it should be torn down. Well, those are the facts as I see them. That's my opinion of that.
I'm listening to Mr. Lockhart right now.
That's all I'd like to say about that. I do have a question regarding pedestrian access on, as we look at the print, the left-hand side here. Seems the right-hand side has a sidewalk somewhere, and over here on the left, you don't have anything. And with the addition of more units like that, you're gonna have a lot of walking traffic in and out of the site, and I think pedestrian safety is an issue here. Could you just go over that and tell us what's happening with that?
Basically, we're proposing to extend the sidewalk all through the frontage on Middlesex Street. We do have a sidewalk extension through here, which is contiguous with a flow, an interior walkway in this direction to this open space. We haven't shown a sidewalk coming in from this side.
Would you be opposed to putting one in there?
I don't think we have a problem with that.
I mean, I think you really need one.
Yes. Yeah, we can have one on either
To
side.
service those new units there.
Sure. Will also help the connection from this side to Middlesex,
Okay.
certainly.
On the fence, I personally would like to see I think a cedar fence is more attractive myself. Because I have white cedar in
Well,
my house.
we were saying that the cedar
And I
fence, we
just-
would not,
I'd prefer that, but that, I don't know if that's.
I tend to agree,
Just
but
a
I don't
couple
know.
other things.
It's all
The
personal
traffic-
preference.
The traffic engineer has made some comments here about the ADA fulfilling their requirements. Do you have fully ADA
I-
compliant parking?
I'll let the engineer.
May I address that? These are all residential units. We did have in the older previous plan, when the mill building was going to be developed, we did have parking on the first level, as Mr. Sullivan indicated, and we did have handicap spaces. But that was for that project, which the building could have elevators or create accessibility for ADA. In this case, these being a private property project, we have visitor parking. The units are not ADA accessible.
Yeah.
So
You're saying there's no need for that?
I'm not saying there's no need. It's just the type of structure that it is. It's basically they all have stairs in to get to the first level, second level. It's all stairs the way they are.
All right, but are you providing handicap parking spaces?
We would, the parking for ADA, we're not showing them on the plan. No, not on this plan. We do have areas that are visitor parking that could be perhaps retrofitted to or created for ADA
All right,
requirements.
I'm not sure what the code states, but I think you're required to do that.
I'm under the impression the code is applicable to public access buildings.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He's made a comment on a sheet that comes back to us, however, and I think
Sure, we did see that comment, and we will look into it.
it should be addressed. And the city engineers also had some comments that we were provided with somewhere here. Yeah, right here. Oh, there's just like 5 items that Mr. Curran, the city engineer, has identified that, right. All right, the drainage design, I guess, is taken care of, but
Yes, we've seen those comments.
familiar with them?
We will address those on the plan revision.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Joe, any questions, concerns at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just following up on Rich's point, the traffic engineer had indicated because of the number of spaces, there may be some ADA accessible spaces required. So you could just check into that. He indicates with the number of spaces, you may need up to 7 ADA accessible spaces, perhaps in the visitor parking spots, but perhaps not. He could check into that. Could you address the facades of the buildings that are facing the street, how they're sited, fronts of the buildings, decks and that type of thing, and how it was decided to site them in the manner they're sited?
If you've, I understand that members of the commission have been out to the site. What we've done when changing the plan from the previous concept, you'll see that these three buildings are already in place. And what we had was a view towards the mill building, an open space towards the mill building. And in this plan here, the new townhouses are kind of a mirror image of these because this road is already in place. What we've tried to do is maintain the open space corridor through on this plan. So the buildings that you see out there and how they're positioned, to answer your question, will be similar. These will be similar. And how
So
they're
the front
placed.
facade of the buildings are facing the riverside?
Right, correct.
Okay. And the decks then, or patios, would be facing the street side?
Correct.
There's some notes just to follow up that the applicant should create an easement to allow the city to access the drainage system. I don't know if that's been done or is in the works, but we'll need an easement to access the drainage system on the site with permission to enter the site. Can you comment too on the lighting?
We have a detail on sheets basically showing the type of street light that we're proposing. It's not a very tall structure. It's 8 feet to the base of the light. So, and we have them strategically located through the site. We have a landscaping and lighting plan. It's sheet C4. Unfortunately, we don't have an exhibit of that, but they are located in strategic locations for pedestrian and pedestrian movements and throughout the main roadways of the site. But the very low intensity lights, I believe it's 100-watt light bulb that these lights take.
Any lightings on the buildings themselves?
I don't believe so. Perhaps just near the doorways there'll be lights.
Electric and water meters should be located in such a way so that they wouldn't be visible from the street. I suppose that won't be an issue for this project. Correct?
Yes, all efforts will be
Utility
done,
meters?
even landscaping if necessary to cover those issues.
And just to clarify, originally this project came to us under 8.1, conversion of the mill buildings. That's no longer the case. This project is not proceeding under 8.1 any longer. It's proceeding as a straightforward project in that you meet all of the zoning requirements regarding parking, open space, landscaping, frontage, and setbacks, correct?
Correct.
I think I agree with Mr. Lockhart. I mean, we love to try and convert the old mill buildings whenever it's possible. We've been successful in doing that. The applicants, developers throughout the city have been successful in doing that around the city, and it really works out well in some cases. But some buildings, I'll quote Bud Caulfield, not historic, they're prehistoric, and if you can't do it, you can't do it. So this unfortunately may be that case, but the developer is reducing it from 132 units under the original proposal to 74. I think that's a benefit to the neighborhood right there in the decrease in density. So that's all I have for comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
If I may, I'm really going to echo some of Mr. Claremont's comments. In looking at the plan, the usually the items that I'm looking at that would be of concern would be the parking, and, you know, we're looking at almost 3 parking spaces per unit. And also, compared to the previous plan where, and I know one of the speakers mentioned the concern of the amount of traffic, the increased traffic. Based on the original plan, you're decreasing the amount of units considerably. So actually, that's going to lessen that impact. Also, and Mr. Moses, I was at that meeting when it was originally approved, and I can recall the discussion that took place regarding the preservation of as many trees as possible as a buffer between the existing condo development. And I know, no matter how good the intentions are, once you start constructing and you get in on the site, it's very difficult to do on many occasions. I think a privacy fence obviously is something that is warranted. As we see, its beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I don't know what is the best,
vinyl
the best
or wood.
solution there. I have my own thoughts on that as well. Also, Mr. Reddy, I can share his frustration regarding the application of 8.1 in the zoning code, but it is there really as a voluntary option to a developer to come in, and it allows, you know, we talk about the concern of the density here in the city, but it actually allows you to create more density but to preserve the building. And that's the trade-off, is to have increased density but preserve the building. In this particular case here, and you know, I think it's something maybe we need to look at down the road, because if a lot of work goes into a project being approved here, and then later on we get structural engineers saying that the integrity of the building has been compromised and therefore we can't continue with the plan, perhaps maybe we should have something in our zoning code that's going to require the type of due diligence to make that type of assurance initially when a project comes before us, and to offset the cost of the engineering would be the increased density. So, you know, something to look for in the future. But I share also the thoughts that perhaps in this particular case, a matter of fact, one could build a case that the mill perhaps is not in character with the neighborhood. I am pleased with, and especially for people that bought into the existing condominiums. If you look at the original plan, you did have, which I was glad to hear, preserving the corridor, as you said, the view that would have gone to the mill, but you still have that green space view going down the development. And also, we didn't discuss, but there's a path, a walkway that goes through that green space, and there's a gazebo as well, and there's also the opening to the river as well. And you have adequate snow storage, green space, this picnic area. This is actually one of the better thought out, larger scale developments that I can recall seeing, to be honest with you. In the visitor parking, I think the visitor parking, we talk about that all the time, because it's just not conceivable to have 2 parking spaces per unit, and then, you know, and when you have, especially something this large, you have to have some visitor parking. So from that perspective, I think that was well thought out. You know, I really have nothing to add, Mr. Chairman. I think a lot of the concerns when we have a major project like this come before us really have been addressed in the plan here. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple quick comments. I agree with a lot of the comments made with other planning board members in regards to the 8.1, where we lessen the requirements when we do the 8.1. We're here when they don't have the 8.1. We increase the requirements, and under this current plan, they either equal or exceed all the requirements they have. As other members said, I'm very happy to see about the extra parking. And the main concern that I have on Middlesex Street up there is the traffic. We've had other projects before us in the past, and we've had testimony about traffic counts. And everybody knows you go over the York Bridge there, and you go into Middlesex Street, and you sit in traffic. Rather right now, we approved 132 units in the past, and now they're reducing that down to 74. My math tells me that's 58 less units. And if we consider 2 cars for every unit, you're talking 116 less cars there each day. Not counting, as they say, how many trips they make per day. So I think for the neighbors up there, this will create less traffic than the project that we approved back in '05. So I'm very happy to see that the traffic will be less. I'm very happy to see the parking. We have plenty of parking. I'm happy to see about the open space. A couple of conditions, I think, on your project would be fine if we could look into the ADA parking requirements, the easement that the city has requested. One of the other questions is basically coming down to the fence. That's one way or another. I particularly like the white vinyl myself. I understand what Mr. Moses is saying because it's maintenance-free. And I think being up there yesterday and looking at the project, I think the white will fit right in with the rest of your project. You know, I know the cedar is there. The cedar has to be maintained. And a lot of times people wait till it gets really deplorable to maintain it. I think if, you put up a fence, whether you go with the cedar or the vinyl, I think it's close either way. I don't think it's something that should make or break a project, my own opinion.
No, I understand.
I think, that's something that if the applicant said to Mr. Moses, we'll put up the white, if we want to make a condition that way, it's up to the board. I know some people agree with me, some people don't, but I don't think that's a breaking point, what type of fence we put up.
Yeah,
but I think-
there's a concern with the height of the fence, though. I think he was indicating that he wanted a very high fence, but, the higher you go on the fence, it becomes a problem with wind and everything else. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
we
we don't
can
want
address
to have a
height.
low fence, but we have to have something reasonable that,
I'd say basically something in the 6-foot area, what we've done usually in the
yeah,
past.
that was my thought,
Most
exactly.
of, other board members have comments on that, I'm more than happy to listen to what they have to say. But usually, basically, the 6 foot most of the time. If you look around other projects in the city and look around just people's own yards and stuff, usually that's basically the requirement. I know there's certain requirements, if you have pools, have to be a certain height and everything else. But I think basically the 6 foot is usually basically what we've approved in a lot of projects in the past. But I think the color of the projects up there, that white is being used through that project, I think it would blend in nicer. I know you can do different colors of cedar, but as again, when you start maintaining the cedar with this, it's vinyl, it's vinyl. Those are basically my concerns. I think basically some of the conditions that are brought out, whether, I agree with Rich basically about that pedestrian access down there. Maybe if we could address that somehow. I know the sidewalk's gonna be put in the front, but I think that pedestrian access, which was a comment that was brought before us from the Division of Planning and Development, I think is a good one. I think we could work on that. We could address it either through the landscape design or basically just have more, since the sidewalk is there, I think the pedestrian access would help improve the flow of foot traffic. And basically, those are my comments on the project.
Mr. Chairman, can I make
Sure.
another comment? So I have to tell you, I'm very torn on this proposal for many of the reasons that my colleagues brought up. I think that it is a good project. I think the way you've laid it out here is good. Lots of open space, extra parking, and in this particular neighborhood, traffic is a huge concern. That intersection of Wood Street and Middlesex Street at the Rourke Bridge is a huge problem. Anything we can do to reduce the number of vehicles that have to go through that intersection on a daily basis, I think, is a good thing. So the idea of reducing this from 130 units to 74, I think, is a very positive thing, and the project is laid out very well. That said, I do think as a city we need to give special care to the maintenance of the mills in the building, even though this is not in the historic district and the historic significance is in question. I think it's an attractive mill building, and it is along the river. The city of Lowell has gotten a lot of mileage out of preserving our mill buildings, and I think we need to be especially sensitive to that. And I must say, when I was there on Saturday, I was particularly, I did like the view of the mill. I think it's an attractive mill building, and I could see where Mrs. McPherson would be a little concerned or a little upset that she bought into this development thinking that the mill was going to stay and she would have that view, and now it's changing. I think it makes it unique. I think it makes it different than the dozens of other condominium developments we have going up in the city. That mill makes this unique, makes it different. I think it's a selling point for you. I honestly think that regardless of what the zoning code allows, there should have been some development or some research on whether or not this building was structurally capable of handling what you intended to do before you started, before you came to the board the first time. So while I'm very torn on the issue, I'm afraid I'm not going to support your site plan for that reason.
Any other comments from board members? If not, I'll entertain a motion, or comment, or a motion.
I just make one more comment that I neglected to make earlier, just in reviewing. The city departments, of course, report back to us, and we have their reports available to us. And we talked about the comments from the engineer that are going to be incorporated into the plans. Other than that, all of the departments have reported favorably on this project: traffic engineer, fire department approval, water utility, Board of Health approval, and wastewater. So all look to be in favor. So that's the final comment. Thank you.
At this point in time, I'll entertain a motion. No. Sorry, that part of the public hearing. What happened is that part of the public hearing was closed. That part of the public hearing was closed. You made your comments. They've addressed what their comments was, what their feeling was towards those. So you say what you thought was fair, then the board members had a chance to say what they thought was fair. So that part of the public hearing is over. It's the board turns
That's
now.
not fair. You
I'm
allowed
sorry.
great liberty among the proponents.
Sir, it's over, okay?
Great.
You made a
As long
statement.
As long as the people of Lowell can see how this process works, sir.
Fine. They can watch us anytime they like.
There's
and we're
been
on
no
tape.
structural reports submitted. We have stamped engineers in the city
I know.
on our employ.
I know, sir. Thank
That's
you.
all subjective.
Thank
That's
you very
all
much, sir.
comments by people who are hired and paid for by the developer.
I heard you, sir. Thank you.
That's good.
Okay. At this point in time, I'll entertain a motion from the board.
Mr. Chairman, we have two matters before us. One is the special permit review and the site plan review. Perhaps I'll make a motion on the site plan first. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the site plan subject to certain conditions. One, that there be a 6-foot privacy fence installed. I won't specify as to whether it's going to be vinyl or cedar. We'll leave that to the developer, and perhaps in consultation with the neighborhood association, they can figure out what would be best. That there be sidewalks to service the new units, and compliance with the ADA requirements for parking if necessary. So I'd make those as the 3 conditions.
One other point for discussion, and I'll second the motion, is the easement for the drainage system.
Oh, yes.
City. And I second the motion.
In addition to the easement, there's some engineer comments that we discussed earlier that need to be incorporated into the plan on the memo dated January 17th, so we'd add that as a condition as well.
Okay. So in regards to the site plan, there's been a motion in favor with 4 conditions, and there has been a second on the matter. All those in favor of the motion signify aye.
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 Chair votes yes. All those against, please state aye.
No.
Okay, so the site plan carries on a vote of 4 members in favor and 1 member, Mr. Gendron, against. So the site plan has been approved. Now we need a motion in regards to the special permit.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a similar motion on the special permit, same conditions.
And I'll second the motion.
Motion is made and second in regards to the special permit.
Mr. Chairman, with the, can I ask one question with
Sure.
the motion on the floor? One other thing that came up when I was walking the site on Saturday was the railroad right behind. A train actually happened to go by while I was there. And I wondered, are there any provisions being made to a fence or something along the railroad to keep, children or whatever from kind of wandering that way?
Yeah, my understanding is that there is going to be a fence along the whole back of the property line where it abuts that B&M line.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Mr. Gendron? No? Okay. So basically in regards to the special permit, we do have a motion on the floor with the same conditions, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it has been a second by Mr. Lockhart. All in favor, say aye.
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 And I believe the vote is all in favor, correct? Okay, so the vote is 5 members for and none against, therefore the special permit does carry. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Good luck with the project.
Good luck.
H.
Moving along, the next project we have is a site plan at 295 Varnum Ave. Wait a couple minutes, let the applicant set up.
Sure.
Huh? Oh, yeah, it is, it's freezing in here. Good feel. It's never been this cold. With the windows open, don't you cold? Yeah. Really. There are a lot of leaks around here somewhere. Wow. That was a good job on him. That was a good job. Yeah, very good. That's right. We shouldn't be talking about people. Yeah, I missed that, I remember.
Okay, moving along, the next matter is the site plan at 295 Varnum Ave. The Lowell Planning Board review an application by Lowell General Hospital for a site plan review of the development of the property located at 295 Varnum Ave. Excuse me? Excuse me? Excuse me, can you be quiet, please, while we advertise on the next matter? Thank you. The proposal includes the construction of a new 112-space parking lot next to the existing parking area to serve the Lowell General Hospital campus. This site is located in the Planned Development Medical Institution Zone District. The site plan review is required under section 11.4 of the zoning code of the city of Lowell. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Wynn Brown. I'm the Vice President of Administration at Lowell General, and I'll be presenting tonight. The hospital is requesting an additional 112 parking spaces adjacent to our what we call employee parking lot C, which is next to the secondary entrance, the employee entrance of the hospital. We are requesting this expansion because over the past 2 years we've added over 200 new employees to the hospital, and our current complement of employee parking is not adequate enough for our first shift, which is our daytime shift. And what we have now is a situation, along with our employee growth, we also have growth in the number of patients that are coming to the campus on a daily basis. And our employees are now being forced to find parking elsewhere on our campus, and it's impacting our patient parking. So almost every day of the week, we actually are at capacity in all our parking lots. And so our proposal is to expand our employee lots by 112 spaces, giving us daytime parking so that we can actually have more capacity for the rest of our campus. Currently, we have 686 employee spaces, and by our estimate of our traffic count, we need at least 725 parking spaces on a daytime shift basis for our employees. So what's happening is they're moving into the employee lot, into the patient lots, and also parking haphazardly in our current space. So that's what we're presenting. We have met twice with the Pawtucketville Neighborhood Association to go over our plans with the neighborhood, to solicit their input and make sure that we've responded to their concerns that the lot is not visible from the street and that it keeps enough tree cover between the neighborhood and the hospital campus so that it does not impinge upon the neighborhood. And we've worked closely with the Department of Planning and Development to make sure that everything we're doing is working within the site in an appropriate manner. Our intent really is that this is a short-term fix for the campus. We are in the midst of master facility planning for our 5, 10, and 20-year build-out of the campus. And so we see this lot as a short-term solution while we finish our long-term plans for the campus and how we plan to build it out. That's,
Okay. So basically, it's just going to be for the employee parking? And I hear
Yes.
you said it was just for daytime, sir, or nighttime? I'm sorry.
Daytime.
Okay. And I believe if you drive, go down Varnum Ave now,
right.
you don't go up the first entrance, you go to the second entrance, I think, where the ambulance go up, and
Right.
also it's
The
a
second-
service entrance, I
It's a
believe?
service entrance, which is also the ambulance entrance to
Right.
the hospital.
And so if you go up that road, it's further up, and it's, there's construction over to the left if you're going up the road?
To the left, adjacent to the property line with the Solomon Mental Health Building.
Sure, okay. I just want to make sure that everybody knows exactly where we're talking, because I was up there looking at it yesterday, I wanted to make sure I was looking at the right spot.
Yeah. We also have some plans, our engineer, Mr. Foley's here, if you'd like him to address any of that as well.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Foley, anything you want to enlighten us with?
Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, just getting back to the location of this, we thought it'd be helpful just to point out this is a 66-acre campus, so it's easy to get lost. As you just stated, this is the entrance over here off Varnum Avenue that goes to the emergency and then to the rear parking lot. This is located to the west of that, in a wooded area just adjacent to the existing parking lot. The total disturbance that is needed to make this work is approximately 1.7 acres. This is a blow-up of the layout itself. We can come in or out either one, but we've set up a rotation maneuvering through the parking lot so that we have a 45-degree angle parking. So if you come in this way, you could go up this way, turn around, come back here and go out, or if you come in this way, you come down here, and we'll have the signage put in place to make sure that that happens and people aren't running into each other. Everything will sheet flow against the curb here, go to a drainage swale down here, and then into a retention pond. There is a safety factor built into the retention pond. During a 100-year storm, there will be approximately 2.25 feet of retention pond left when we reach the top elevation for the 100-year storm. This is designed to retain the entire volume of that storm with no outlet. So there's no spillway or outlet to the storm. We're going to retain the entire storm. Again, this is a little more complicated plan that shows all the finished grading. If you had any questions relative to that, I know it gets a little busy and difficult to read. We can certainly answer any questions relative to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to speak with you for the application at this time, sir? If not, I'll turn it over to the public.
No.
Okay, thank you. Anyone here want to speak in favor of the application? Yes, sir. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address, please, if you would.
I'm Dick Carville. I live at 55 Trotting Park Road. I'm the co-chair of the Pawtuckaville Citizens Council, and the Board of Directors has asked me to come here this evening and speak in favor of this proposal that the hospital has before you this evening. The hospital, Mr. Brown, has come to our meeting last month, and he went over this in a great deal of detail with our membership. They're very, very concerned about the neighborhood concerns, making sure that they didn't impinge on any of the neighborhood views or the aesthetics of the neighborhood. We've found them to be a very good neighbor and very supportive of the neighborhood association and the neighbors. And we know they need this, because of their success, we know they need this parking, and we just want to lend our support to it.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I'm very happy to hear that they came to your neighborhood association group and took care of any concerns that you may have. That speaks a lot for the hospital. Obviously, this board is very happy when the applicant has the opportunity to go speak to the neighbors ahead of time. A lot of times they can answer a lot of questions or issues before they even get to us. And therefore, with work with the neighbors, hopefully, it helps us as the board members to see a better project, which is the best thing we have in our hopes to fulfill good projects for the city. And we appreciate you speaking tonight. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in favor? In favor? In favor? Hearing none. Anybody here like to speak in opposition? In opposition? In opposition? Hearing none. Public hearing is closed. I'll turn the matters over to the board members. Do you have any questions, concern? I know you're very influential up there in the neighborhood.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and actually, in my waning days as the head of the PCC, I did speak to Mr. Brown regarding what they were proposing, and certainly encourage them to go to the neighborhood group. And I actually did attend the meeting because we didn't have our meeting that Monday. And I just, all the concerns, I think that Mr. Brown had mentioned that the neighborhood was in favor. And for myself personally, as a board member, it is buffered from the main road. It's buffered from the surrounding neighborhood as well. And also, a comment I would have, and I know this is somewhat temporary, and I know there was some discussions as to some future plans on the site, but and I think for the time being, I think this is adequate. But I know as part of probably a master plan that may come back, I think in our zoning code, it does require certain landscaping and breaking up when you have more than 10 contiguous spaces. But I think in this particular case, I think what's being proposed for myself personally, I think is appropriate. And just a comment, I can tell you that one of the concerns that residents had was traffic exiting the hospital and not using the residential streets that are directly across from the hospital as the main driveway to get to the hospital. And Mr. Brown has been very responsive, getting, matter of fact, signage out immediately to encourage vehicular traffic to go to the signalization of the corner of Varnum Ave and Pawtucket Boulevard. So, and I think I would just encourage and I don't know if signage is over in this entrance as well.
It is.
But obviously, you're going to encourage more people to come further down into the neighborhood to park here, and even though they're going to be employees, the tendency is to use the streets that are directly in front of the hospital. And the hospital, much to its credit, is one of the larger employers in the area, so it does have an impact, but I do know you're sensitive to that. So, again, appreciate you going to the neighborhood group as well.
Mr. Chairman, any questions or concerns?
Not really, Mr. Chairman. I was up there also on Saturday. Looks like it's very well done. As Jerry was saying, it's kind of tucked away on the side of the property there. It's got a good buffer. It looks like it slopes well down into the drainage section. My only question was, we have a note here that says the city engineer may want to validate that the drainage pond can handle, the retaining pond can handle the runoff. You quoted some statistics to us, and I'm wondering if the city engineer has had an opportunity to look at that and confirm.
Probably hasn't. This is a miscue on our part. The drainage calculations didn't get submitted with the initial filing, so we did send them out last week, so they should have them now. Again, we put a factor of 2x in there for safety.
Mm-hmm. So whatever we do here, I would like to make it subject to confirmation by the city engineer that the retaining pond can handle the runoff.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I can briefly comment on that.
Sure.
I have tried to get in contact with the city engineer's office. I trust that the applicant has submitted that. I'm sure some of the board members are aware that city engineer Steve Curran actually recently retired from the city, so I'm not sure if there's just some confusion on their part as to who is making the comments or where the comments actually are. They probably are already made, but just weren't forwarded over to our department yet.
Who's being delegated to make the concerns?
Exactly. So I'll continue to try to keep in contact with the engineer's office to ensure that I get those comments back.
Okay. Thank you, James. We appreciate that. Mr. Lockhart, any questions, concerns?
The only concern I had was about the drainage into the retention pond. I think we've addressed that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I have
Mr. Claymore?
no questions, just a comment. I think that it's well thought out and well designed, so I would certainly support it.
Thank you. I basically echo the same. I think it's a good project. I mean, obviously, it's just going to be the parking for the employees during the daytime. I don't think it's going to affect their neighborhood. Obviously, as you explained, when you come with growth, you're going to use up more parking. I know you've done a good job in the past when you came before us. I know you have a good parking scheme there to the right. We come in where the cancer center is. You have the parking there. You have the overflow down to the right. I know that's being utilized properly. You have the garage on site. As you say, as you get a little bigger and you add new parts that are possible, you do need new parking. And I think the way this is laid out, I think it'll have a minimum effect on the neighborhood. As indicated, you can't see it from the street. You can't see it from the other people in the neighborhood. And I encourage you, like I said earlier, from going to get the neighborhood's concerns first. I think it makes it easier for us as board members. If you address their concerns, then you come before us. A lot of times, those concerns have already been reduced in number to us, and there's only a couple of questions for us to consider. in regards to, obviously, the drainage, I think maybe if we made a motion, maybe it could be contingent upon getting final approval from the city engineer, whoever's being delegated at this point in time. Mr. Foley, do you have any concerns about that, or Mr. Brown, any concerns if we just wait? Because usually what happens is, as you know, when it comes before us on a site plan, when we give all the copies of these plans to all the city departments, we can't vote on them until we get comments back. And obviously, we did get the comments back, but this one here had a concern, and hopefully, if you could work with the city engineer on that and just to alleviate the questions they have. And obviously, if there's something that can't be agreed upon, then I'll just request you bring it back before the board and we'll make the final say. You have any problems with that, Mr. Foley?
not at all,
If
Mr.
he doesn't agree with something, you have an issue on it, bring it back before us. We're the ones who make the decisions one way or another. Either if you can't agree, fine. If you can't agree, then bring it back and we'll be more than happy to entertain it.
I'm pretty confident we'll be all set.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Brown?
No, that's it, thank you.
Okay. At this point in time, then, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval of the site plan as presented with the condition regarding the drainage, and that we get final clarification from the engineer's office regarding that.
Motion's been made. Anybody want to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Gentleman, second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes yes. Therefore, the vote carries 5 in favor, none against. Good luck and thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Foley. Appreciate your help.
Huh? Yeah, you can, I'm just going to be very brief. It's going to be over.
Thank you. Leave that one there. Missed a lot.
Thank you.
Moving along, the next matter comes under new business, which is what's known as our pre-application session. This is for applicants to come before the board and get some of our feedback. The following individuals have requested for the planning board to provide a preliminary review of the proposed project at the address listed below. These are not public hearings. Each project will require a public hearing at a future date. However, anybody who's here like to speak in regards to these applications, the board always will let anybody here speak, therefore we can get as much information as possible before us, before we have to consider later, or at least give some feedback back to the applicant, and therefore we believe it's very helpful to the board as well as the applicant. The matter we have in front of us is 35 Manufacturer Street. The applicant is Polis Engineering. The project is the construction of 20 units, and the zoning is a traditional mixed-use zone, and under the zoning requirements, they will need a site plan and a special permit. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, James Flood, representing Genco LLC, which is really Dean Jenkins, who's here with us tonight, who's the proposed developer. We got Matt Hammer from Polaris Engineering, who's our engineer, and also the owner of the property here, Sandra Fishman, is in the back of the room. I'm sure, well, I don't know whether you people have seen the site, but it's a vacant piece of property on Manufacturing Street, which is really a dumping ground for the entire neighborhood. If you go in there, you'll see shopping carts, you'll see trash, you'll see everything in there. So I think whatever happens here would be a great improvement. It's Dean's hope to develop 20 3-bedroom townhouse units on the site. We are presently considering also making it a gated community because of the location down there, to keep just to allow just the residents in. Matt can tell you when he's been down there doing the work that I think there's some illegal activities going on down there too. So I think this would be a benefit to the neighborhood. We have provided sufficient parking based on the 3 bedrooms. There are 45 parking spaces in there. The plan conforms with all aspects of the zoning for the TMU zone. So we're here to present what we would like to do. Any comments or that the board might have, or any recommendations that we could incorporate in our final plan, we'd be glad to consider. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt. He can explain the engineering, and we'd appreciate any comments that the board would have.
Thank you, Mr. Flood. Matt? Usually that blue light is on. It's a blue one, right? That's great. Green? We don't hold it, so. Ours is green. I don't know what color that one.
Engineering-wise, there isn't too much engineering in this plan, but what I can say to you is what's shown in brown is the location of what is a combination of duplexes and triplexes shown here, as well as what's shown here in gray is the proposed pavement. And what we're proposing is a one-way entry into the project and a one-way entrance out of the project. And we're also, everything shown in green is going to be landscaped areas. This will most likely either have a subsurface drainage system or an open drainage system, which will be located in this area over here. The site is mainly flat for the most part. It's like Mr. Flood has told you, it's right now its condition is pretty bad, and we're anticipating that by coming in with this development and incorporating some landscaping as well as some additional fencing that would be required, we believe that this layout is the best layout for the project. We've gone through multiple scenarios, and we feel as though this layout seems to be the one that works the best. We've also met with James Erickson and George Kourakis, and have also gone over the entire project as well as gone over other scenarios. Can you answer any questions you have?
I just have a couple, if you don't mind. I see you have a dotted line. It goes around, and then it heads to that big parcel in the back. Can you tell me what that dotted line is?
It's a building setback.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. The green parcel facing the back, I'm sorry. The green parcel in the back, no, to the right, over there. That just open space, or what's that? Okay.
That's open space, yeah.
One of the questions you said, I think Mr. Flood said it might be a gated community?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you explain what type of gated area it would be, or how it would be?
Would be like a card to get in.
Card to get in?
Card to get in, right.
What type of gate would you have around the whole exterior of
I don't think we've,
I mean, if you're looking for safety, I'm just curious. I mean, if you know offhand at this point, if you do or you don't, I'm just curious. If you could just speak up at the microphone for people at home, please. Thanks, Mr. Jenkins, I appreciate it. All right.
Dean Jenkins,
Yeah.
Jenko LLC. What I've looked at it for the start, I mean,
Yeah.
basically it's preliminary at this
Right.
point in time, is probably wrought iron along the front.
Okay.
You know, some sort of wrought iron that would run that entire way.
Mm-hmm.
And the back and sides would be, probably different. We probably
Yeah.
wouldn't gate that entire thing in with wrought iron. We'd probably use, there's existing fencing there now.
Okay.
One side, it's pretty high. The other, the back fence is graffiti filled, that would, and it also has some disrepair to it, so it needs to be fixed. The side that actually abuts some condominiums that exist is up in the air, a lot higher than this site, at least the fence part is, so we'd probably leave that kind of more connected, and then it'd be a gate community where you'd actually drive in.
Keypad,
and
yeah.
Put a keypad or a card and open up.
I'm familiar with a lot of them, not too many of them in Lowell, but in other cities and states have them. That's why I was just my only question was, I know we don't have many of them here in Lowell, so I'm just
No.
curious not too many that I can recall come before us have a gated community. I mean, I know you see a lot of them down in Florida and a lot of other places, and I know how the process works to get in and get out, and people lose the cards, how they can change the cards and all that for safety reasons. So I just had a question in regards to that, where it's basically, we don't see a lot of it in the
Well,
board. So
it's
just-
for safety reasons in that neighborhood, Mr. Lenahan.
yeah,
So that's-
yeah, that's why I'm just curious about what type of gated area, because we don't see that much of it in this city.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
May I just briefly comment on, we discussed the
Sure.
gated community concept when George Poikis and I met with Matt Hammer. And generally, from a DPD perspective, you probably haven't seen it a lot in the city because it's not necessarily an encouraged concept. Usually we encourage developments that are part of the larger neighborhood. With a site like this, it is in an area that does need some cleanup. Cleaning up this site will naturally clean up the area around it in some respects. With that said, should the applicant still want to pursue a gated community concept, I think a lot of attention needs to be paid towards type of fencing, location of fencing around the site, and all these and many other details, how it's going to be run, what the other type of security measures will there be. And if the board is encouraging that type of process, we can definitely sit down with the applicant to discuss those details. But I just wanted you to be aware that it's generally not something that we encourage throughout the city in townhouse-style developments, because we do encourage connection with a larger neighborhood. Of course, each site is different, so it does pose different difficulties. I just wanted to make that
Sure, yeah, I'm just saying, that's the only reason why I made the question, is that we don't see a lot of them, so it was informational question to answer some questions that I would have. I'm not saying I'd be against it, just want to find them, make sure it kind of fits in there nicely. Obviously, if it's a security reason, I'm all in favor of security and the safety of your applicants. Obviously, if you're going to try to market these, you want people to feel safe in the area. If you're not going to feel safe in the area, then you're going to put a lot of work into it, and if they don't sell, then obviously it's not going to turn out to be good value for the city. I mean, obviously, you want something that's going to work. I know here in the planning board, we want something that's going to fit in there. If you feel that needs that safety security system, I know sometimes security is a peace of mind for a lot of people. That's why I just asked, how about you're going to do it? Because I don't recall seeing one in the city. It looks like you meet all the open space. I don't see any problem with the open space. I think, if I'm not sure, do you have is it some visiting parking on the site as well?
There's, under the zoning, it's
five spots.
Some
Yeah,
overflow
that's
parking.
where it was. I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's five.
There is a gated community at the Grandview condominiums.
Which one?
The Grandview condominiums
Okay.
on Pawtucket Boulevard.
Okay,
There's
yeah.
a gated
Yep.
community there.
I recall now you
It was
mentioned
a concept we thought about, wasn't anything that we're really set on.
Okay.
We have Burger King here.
Okay.
It's located here. We have an aerial photograph. Here, which shows Burger King here. And if you go out to the site, and I'm encouraging the planning board to go out to the site, maybe take a look around. But what happens is there's a parking area here, and at night, this area is actually used for something related to something going on with the Burger King, where people park at night, do whatever they do at night, go into this area behind this fencing, and it's an obvious signs of things that are going on in the property.
Okay.
And we just wanted to make sure that, if we create this development, that we have some sort of security measure, whether it be fencing, or it's a combination of both. And that it was just something that just came up, and we thought, we obviously know that projects like this haven't been, common in the city. We just get a feel for that concept.
Personally, I don't think whether it's gated or not gated would break the project. Obviously, the main concerns we look at is, as council knows, the parking, the setback, the requirements, all the things that are in our regulations. I don't know if we have anything in our regulations that controls a gated community. I mean, I can
No,
think
but-
of, on the site plan, when you look through the checklist, it doesn't have it, but obviously, for the extra security system, I think we would consider it, obviously.
I think, as Matt said, if you went out and saw what we were talking about, that's the reason with
Sure.
considering it, because we want to protect the people
Yep.
that would buy in there in the future. I'm not saying the final plan's going to have that, it's just a thought that we're
Yeah.
considering to
it's a-
try to protect those people.
Are there any decks planned here, or is it just?
you speak up, Mr. Jenkins? What happens is people at home can't hear if you don't do the
Sorry,
microphone. I'm sorry.
again, the ones that are in front, that are right on Manufacturers Street,
Right.
probably not, because the garages will enter through via the rear, so they probably wouldn't be able to have decks. But the side units and the rear units probably would be able to have some.
Okay, that makes sense. As far as the parking, are these garage under units?
Yep.
So you have, like 55 parking spaces?
45
45.
parking spaces.
45?
Yeah.
There's 2 for each unit.
2 for each, okay, plus the 5 visitors?
Plus the 5 in the
Additional
back.
5 here.
Okay, 45, 20, yeah, so let's do.
That's based on .75 per bedroom, because there's,
Yeah, that, you know, you might want to expand that visitors parking a little bit. It's just that's low.
well,
.75 doesn't.
you only need, if it was 2.2, you'd only need 44.
I'm just saying, you know, get as
Yeah.
much as you
So
can.
there's more.
Without, you know, spoiling your open space.
Well, there's
The
room
more
down
you
in
can
the,
get in
there's
there-
room down there to do it anyways.
Yeah.
There's plenty of
I
open
think you
space
do.
there.
So I'd encourage you to do that.
Yeah, we could do that, but that's, I mean, we based it on 45 because that was greater than
Right.
what the 2.2 would be.
Are they 2-bedroom units? Is that-
3-bedroom units.
3-bedroom units, so you got, I would say. Right.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Go
from-
ahead, Jerry, if you would.
From a practical sense, I'm just looking at the site of the dumpster and looking at coming in as a one-way and 12-foot opening and 22 feet and cars parked. I don't, I don't know what.
We're going to move that, actually.
Okay,
We're going
yeah.
to put that dumpster over in here.
All right, like I said, I could just visualize myself trying to drive the truck, not a good thing, so.
I already pointed it out to him, Jerry.
Okay.
Maybe
Speaking of that,
2
can I-
dumpsters.
On the site of this nature, did you ever any consideration of maybe putting 2 dumpsters, one on each end of the project?
Yeah.
I mean,
you know,
just
when you
so
got
the poor guy who's on the furthest doesn't have to bring it all out, especially if it's, I mean, just an idea.
2 small ones as opposed to 1 big one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we may have 2 dumpsters.
Steve, any questions, concerns?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, with the parking, I had a question. Looks like you're counting 2 spaces, one a garage space and one in the driveway in front of the garage?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, James, is that, we can count that as 2 spaces, is that true?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
acceptable under regulations.
tandem
Yes.
parking like that is allowed. It's when you have tandem internally that is not allowed. You can have a space garage and then a space external, and that's allowed by the zoning.
So if you're asking me what, what would I like, what would be my ultimate, goal for this project, I think that constrains, even though it's legally acceptable, it constrains the parking even more, right? Because people have to jockey and move around their cars to get in and out. So I agree with Mr. Claremont that additional, Mr. Lockhart, sorry, additional parking would be a benefit here. The other thing is, this is right on the edge of the dwelling area per land unit, and it's a requirement by the city. It's a misshapen lot here, right? We have these appendages kind of sticking out, and my feeling is that the dwelling area per land, the land area per dwelling unit, is intended to make sure there's enough space, for people, so that we're not on top of each other. Yet, when we're including these appendages into that calculation, it kind of goes counter to what we're trying to accomplish with the dwelling area per land unit. Do you follow what I'm saying? I think that really we should consider what is the dwelling area per land unit if we didn't have those appendages. Because that's really, if this was a square lot, that's really what we would be looking at.
But it's not, that's the way it's always been, except for that small
I
little piece on
understand.
the
You're asking
left.
me for my opinion
Yeah.
on this, and I think that I think you should provide more land area per dwelling unit on this, because the way these appendages are, it's kind of a misshapen lot, and it's not really providing the roominess in the development that the city would really like.
If I may.
Sure.
And I'll approach this stuff with Matt, but, when I look at this, it is pretty much a rectangular lot. Very long, very deep, for, you know, and I've done a lot of projects in the city that, you know, I've worked with some misshapen lots, you know, some kind of, some different characteristics to it. But this has the ability, you know, if I may, to potentially in that open space create, you know, like that small open space area I was thinking about, potentially boxing that in and using it as a playground type area, you know, using the other appendage as a playground area. And I understand your point, but if you go out this site and see it size, it really is long and very, you know, so I'm trying to spread it out as much as possible, which creates, in fairness to, you know, to the project, is a lot of paving, a lot of, you know, a lot of place for people to park. And I think if we address that additional parking, you know, in some of the areas of it, I think it'd be a pretty good project. And if I brought it in as, you know, preliminary, what we looked at, and I think Matt might even have a copy of it, which was basically 5 4-unit buildings. You know what I mean? It kind of even gives more vastness to it. But I know that, you know, we're trying to create, it's hard for a developer actually in trying to figure out exactly what works sometimes nowadays, you know, which is the best form of a plan. But in general, it seems like, you know, non-connected, as many, you know, kind of village-style units are best. And in developing this site, in doing it that way, the cost becomes more significant. So when you lose units, doing it in more of a style that is in character with the city, it becomes, you know, a detriment to the developer, because I spend a lot more money trying to make it what the city is hoping to and intend. So, you know, I'd appreciate when we look at it, that we look at the overall project, you know, because I really believe that 20 is the number that works on this site. And, you know, it's dirty all the way up and around, you know, and that's all going to get cleaned up and turned into something different.
Right. So I can appreciate that. And I do like the fact that you're separating the units, you're not connecting everything. I think that's a good thing. I have been to the site. I was up there this week, and I got to tell you, this neighborhood is incredibly dense. I mean, it's just, it's not a good situation, right? And so I think that, in my opinion, I don't want to exacerbate that any more than we have to. It would be good to clean up this site, but all I'm saying is that I'd like to see you have a little more land area per dwelling unit. Maybe if you eliminated a couple of the units and made it 18 instead of 20, and gave a little bit more land area in this main part of the project, because I understand what you're saying about the playground, but that's still, what that does is it condenses everybody else on top of each other down in the main project. So that's my feedback, is I think this would be a better project if you increased the amount of land area per dwelling unit. The other thing I would say is, you know, if you thought about, I think 2 bedrooms are better than 3 bedrooms, just because, you know, it means less people, so less denseness. And I also think the one-way entrances are going to be tough, because I think that's pretty hard to police. And if you design an entrance that's intended to be one way, so there's only one car going one way, I think people are going to may violate that. Maybe you can control that with the gated aspect of it, but I'm just saying that if you could make the entrances 2-way, I think that makes you know, everybody's life a little bit easier.
I think part of what we talked about with the one-way in and one-way out was actually in your meeting with James, I believe. It had something to do with the road directly across Angle Street there. You know, a lot of cars, a lot of cut through and so forth. So instead of dumping them, you know, our hope on Whipple and Watson Street, a project that I approved in the city, you know, it seems to be working effectively to come in one way and out another. So I can appreciate, you know, like looking at that part of it, but I think we talked a little bit, or at least Matt talked to him about the reason why was to try to divert some of the traffic from Angle Street. So if it means coming out both sides, fine. You know what I mean? It makes some sense to me. The only other thing I talk about, you know, just to get back to a very dense, you know, and I agree, next door is a very dense project to the side of me, you know, under old zoning and under, you know, I guess under old zoning and in old ways, those were created obviously under that characteristic. And in hopes as a city, and you change and adapt to new times and more of what you're trying to create, there's a reason why you're allowed to get a certain amount of units on a parcel, And it's hopefully, you know, I mean, I've been involved now in the city for 10 years or 11 years doing projects, and, you know, I've seen the numbers of units that I can do on a site. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's always just been a math problem for a developer, you know what I mean, to come in. I don't need more units. But what's happening is that we get asked to come into these meetings when the zoning has, you know, changed at least 3 times since I've been doing business in the city. And every time we get asked to dump or drop a unit here or there, you know, we base it, our proposals to customers and to sellers based upon a number of units that the city allows us to try to do. And, you know, so we can do things like change the size of some of those buildings, you know, try to incorporate different styles that the city wants. But when it talks about, you know, turning a parcel that you purchase for a certain amount to try to get a certain amount of units on there, that, and honestly, I believe there's a lot of open space here, far more than what's required, you know.
It's not far more than, it's not far more than what's
Well,
required.
it's more than what's required.
It's 9 feet more than what's required, right, per dwelling unit.
Per dwelling unit.
Right.
But, you know, the overall scope of things, this is why, you know, it gets confusing for us too, you know, because we go out and we look at what's current. You know, we play by the rules that are adopted, and then the rules, you know, we go out and make our purchases based upon the rules, and then when the time comes to adapt those rules at this meeting, working with the city all the way through, you ask.
I understand.
to
I
drop
understand,
that,
but
and
I,
it becomes,
so I understand.
becomes a question of viability.
I understand, and it's a trade-off between profitability and, you know, and building something with, you know, more space and more capacity. But my point to you is that I know those laws exist, and I know that, you know, there's certain guidelines that we go by, but I think we have the ability on this board to provide a certain amount of subjectivity to it for certain conditions. And what I'm saying is, based on the denseness of that neighborhood and based on the fact that this is a misshapen lot, I think I would like to see more land area per dwelling unit. So you can take that for what it's worth, but that's my opinion.
Any other board members, any questions, concerns?
I think most of the members have touched upon the areas that I'd be concerned about, but you certainly appear to have some large area of green space up in the top end there, and I'm wondering if you could reconfigure your visitor parking where you have the 5 spaces now. If you were to run the parking up some of that green space, you could probably get quite a few more spaces in there by turning it and having them either at an angle or whatever. Probably could add another 5 or 6 spaces in there, which would be helpful. 'Cause when you know, you've got your 2 spaces per unit, but one's in the garage, one's in front. Yeah, the visitors, you know, you've got the minimum requirement, but if you're able to get in a few more, I think that'd be helpful overall to your project without it. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, because that's what, 48 feet wide, that strip right there?
That's correct.
Yeah, so you could run some parking, either angled parking up in that area, I would think, and get, you know, 5 or 6 more spaces up there without eating up the good portion of the green space that you want to keep open as green space.
I think to touch on that issue, I agree with that. I mean, I think a project you look at something like this is, if you're going to have visitor parking, what I would visualize seeing, if I was in one of these units and I was going to have a visitor coming to visit, I'd probably park my car in the visiting parking and leave my parking space in front open, because therefore I could park it out there in the morning, and then when someone came to visit me, maybe at noontime or 1 o'clock, especially if I was a little further away from the unit, then I would have my own parking right in front for my guests. You know, that way I would know that they had a parking spot that was open, where if the visitors gets used up, then you have somebody coming to visit you, you don't have a parking spot. But if you save your own in front and you park your own car there, I could see where some people would do that, as, you know, make room. I know, like in my family, we always had the relatives come in, was make room to have so-and-so park in the driveway. You know, kids, put your cars in the street. Let so-and-so park closer to the house, especially if you have someone elderly coming, you want them to park in the front. But always move your cars, make sure there's a parking spot for Uncle so-and-so, make sure. So, but I think if you have, as I said, a little more of the parking, as you know, we always like a little more parking, and also we always like the green space. I know as Steve touched on, basically, you know, they have the parking in the garage and the parking in front. I'm not big on it, but I know it meets our requirement under the zoning, because I always foresee, like in my own garage, the snow blower, the lawnmower, the bikes, the car don't fit anymore. It doesn't fit. I mean, the saucers in the winter and everything else, I come home, open the garage door, I get a car in there. Luckily, I have enough with my driveway and it's L-shaped. I can pull in there. But, you know, once you put the barrels in there and everything else, it doesn't fit. And if you're in a unit like this, storage gets put down there. But I've thought about that, and I echoed those concerns in the past, and they tell me it meets the requirement. So personally, do I like it? No, but if it meets the requirement, I'm kind of stuck by it. But that's a concern I see with the one underneath and one in front. As you said too, Steve, one got to pull out, let the other one out. But I know it meets the requirement, and that's what we have in the zoning code. So if they meet the requirement, personally, I always like the two side by side, you know. And I think underneath, when you start putting storage there, it gets to be a problem. Maybe people in the units like this better utilize their space than a homeowner like myself. I don't know. But I can see where your concern is, Steve, because I've had that concern for a long period of time. So I know that when I've always raised it, they say, well, your requirements are this, and then they tell me later, you know, Mr. Linney, and you know, that's your personal belief, but we have to stick by the zoning code. So
If I could add something to that. If you notice in these areas, there's a significant amount of area left over in that ground level after the car is in the garage. So there's a significant amount of storage additional in that one space. And the other thing is that this is a
that's good to see, yeah.
It's
Because some of them are tight. Some of you open the car doors and they hit the side.
You're going to have all this area here beyond that dashed line is above and beyond the required space.
That's
And
good to see.
The other thing is this is a condominium complex too, so you're not going to need a snow blower. The site's going to be maintained by the association, you know, and all those other things that you need when you're taking care of your own property, things like the lawnmower and
But you still might
all
get the
tools
bikes,
you need to
you might
work
get the
on your
bikes
yard
and that kind of stuff if
So
you have children there. But
the outside of this property is maintained by the entire association, so people who live here aren't allowed to go out and use their hedge trimmers or anything like that because they don't own the outside. They only own inside the condominium.
Well, I'm glad you pointed out that you have the extra room in there, because even just storage stuff, as people, you know, in boxes and stuff, you know, it's good to see the extra room in the units, so if you get the car in there, you do have other things around there.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good point you brought up.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
May I make a couple quick comments?
Sure.
Just for everybody's reference. On all projects, internal garage spaces do have a larger requirement than an external space. In most cases, external spaces are 9 by 18 feet roughly, depending on the zoning district. Internal spaces, I believe, are 21 by 11 feet, which accommodates for that storage concern that's in there.
And the doors.
And the doors and that sort of thing. It does appear that they do have more than that. Obviously, once the architectural drawings come in, then we can actually see what the sizes of those spaces are. Also, to speak on just a general point with all projects that require site plan and special permit, there is a level of discretionary review that the board is always allotted in those projects that does go above and beyond zoning. That is also the point of adding the 11.3.2A section to the zoning ordinance for both the applicant to review and take into account when they're proposing their own project, but also for the board to review and take into account when they're reviewing the project. And I just want to make those general points for all projects that are in front of the planning board that require site plan and special permit for use of the site.
Right. Thanks, James, for saying that, because, you know, if it were just a matter of does it meet the code, then we wouldn't need us. I mean, you just put it through the computer. Yep, it's good. You know, grant the permit. So that's why I think looking at a site like this, you know, it's incumbent upon me to see how this might be treated exceptionally. And I really think that those appendages of land should really not be included in the site area per dwelling unit and the land area per dwelling unit, because they don't add to the roominess of the site where the dwellings are.
Any other comments from the board members? Any questions? No? Gary, you all set? Yeah. Any more questions from us, Mr. Follett?
I think we've heard your comments.
Thank you very much, and good luck with the project, and maybe we'll see you at in for a public hearing.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board.
Thank you. Thanks for your input, we appreciate it.
This one,
Moving along, we have one more project under the pre-application stage. This project is 76-80 Rogers Street. The applicant is Perry and Rogers LLC. The project is construction of 35 townhouse-style units. The zoning is a traditional mixed-use zone, and the required review would be a site plan and a special permit. Those of you who are not basically familiar with the site, it would be the old Mother Hubbard building on the bottom of Perry Street. While Mr. Flood is passing out the handouts for you, I just want to let you know that there was a site walk on this project about almost 3 weeks ago when I believe it was, as indicating
Back to the hospital?
I was just saying, Mr. Flood, that as indicated, that there was a site walk on this project almost 3 weeks ago. I myself attended that site walk at the request of Planning and Development. James Erickson was there, George Porakis was there, your applicant was there, Bill Topia was there, and a couple other people had some questions and concern, and we did walk the site and try to view the inside and the exterior of it. Saying that as it be, at this point in time, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, well, as you said, Rogers and Perry LLC would be the developer, and that's really Tom Scott, who's here tonight, who you met, and his sister Diane O'Brien, who's not here. They were both members of the old Mother Hubbard family that ran the business there. Also, we got Jerry Foley, who's our engineer with us, and we got Fran Sagendorf from Bill Topia's office.
She was with us too at the site. Yeah. Mr. Topia was there. I know he couldn't be here this evening because he called me this afternoon because he had his brother passed away.
Yeah.
And he said he would have been here, but he couldn't make it, and I offer my condolences to him.
Like the prior project, this is zone TMU, and it requires site plan review and a Section 12 special permit. The plan as presented tonight conforms to zoning. We won't be requesting any other variances or special permits. And I have been working with Tom and Diane for over a year on this matter, and let me tell you that initially their intention was to go in and to renovate the existing old Mother Hubbard building and turn it into residential dwellings. But after a year of review and various other problems, it's been determined that that building cannot, because of the smell in there that's been there for many years from the dog food manufacturing, that we can't remove it, and so it cannot be used for residential. It'd be very difficult to be used for residential. So the plan as presented tonight would be for the demolition of that existing building. It's not historic in any way. I mean, I grew up in the neighborhood, so I remember it for many years. But because of what's in there, it'd be very difficult to develop it. What we are proposing is 35 townhouse condominium units. I was given a letter tonight from planning staff, so I didn't get a chance to review it before, but our plan is a little different than what that letter states, and there are reasons for it, and I'll let Jerry go into it. But our proposal would be to bring it, the entrance would be off Rogers Street into the project, and then it'd be a driveway inside. All of the projects would face in. When we talk about neighborhood character, well, there is a neighborhood there, but there's an elevation problem there on Perry Street and coming in off Perry Street. Also, that's a very narrow street. It's a cut-through from Andover Street to Rogers Street. On the other side of us, there's I don't know, how many condos are in the church? Is there 12 or 16? Huh?
8.
Only 8? There are 8 condos which come out onto...
The old Lithuanian church, yeah.
Yeah, the old Lithuanian
Which Mr.
church, which come out onto Perry Street. I think there's 4 multifamily homes, and then there's a body shop. And I think most of the rest of the street is commercial use. So there's a lot of commercial trucks going up and down. And on the right, there's a big parking lot as you go further down Perry Street. So we feel that that Roger Street's a better way to enter the property because Perry Street is narrow, there's a lot of traffic on that street, and there's a lot of traffic coming out from both the church and those homes. And, you know, I grew up in that neighborhood. Across the street we had a car wash, we had a gas station. I've never seen any problems entering that site, so I don't think we'd have a problem coming into this site. And on the other side, we have the electric wires from Mass Electric. So
With the power lines there.
power lines.
Yeah.
So that's why we wanted to try to make it like a little village inside, so the traffic would come in and we'd do some landscaping inside. The units would face each other and have like a street, and then we could put some something on the back of the buildings that would face either the river and on Perry Street. So that's why it was designed the way it is designed before you tonight, instead of the other way, on Perry Street, because we feel for marketing purposes, this is the best way to do it. So I'll turn it over to Jerry. He can discuss the engineering. We have plenty of room here for snow storage. We have, the trash would be a private pickup. It'd be stored inside, be a private pickup. And then we've got 77 parking spaces. But like the other one, Mr. Gendron, this has got a large appendage on it too, which we can't do anything about, but it's been there forever, so. Go ahead, Jerry. It could, I haven't seen the calculation, so I don't know what it is, but go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman. Again, Jerry Foley from Belanger & Foley Incorporated. I'd like to just maybe take you through a couple of drawings here to get you oriented. I know you've been to the site and everything, but sometimes it just helps to kind of quantitatively take a look at this. This is an existing conditions plan. The brown here shows you where the existing building is. The gray shows you the extent of the pavement. And even though this is green, if you go out in the field, it's more like dirt. And everything going back here as well. There's a pretty well-defined tree line up here on the sloped area, and then the rest of it is pretty much rubble. If you look at the United States Soil Conservation Service map, it identifies this pretty much as just Udorthans or an urban landfill. Not that it was used as a trash site. It's just that it's been filled in and compacted over the years. Here's Perry Street, here's Rogers Street, and here are the electric lines for the power company going along this side. What we don't show you here, which is adjacent to this paved area, is another paved area which goes underneath the power lines. So we just kept it within the confines of this orange line, which tells you where the property is. The reason I wanted to show you this is for you to get a feel for, in the developable portion, or what we're calling the developable portion of this piece of property, the extent of which there is an impervious area. It's either roof or pavement. Vicinity-wise, we thought it was important to kind of take a step back and a bird's eye view of exactly where this piece of property sits, especially understanding that there are some plans in the future for a greenway here along the river. Yeah. And I think that there's a considerable amount of distance here that people weren't aware of. So this is where the proposed units would go as we're proposing them, the additional parking down the back, and then the extent of that appendage. I'm not going to bore you with these photos, but I think you've all been out there and you've seen it. And one of the challenges we think of this site is trying to, I know the intent is to try to do something that's within keeping in the neighborhood. The hard part here is trying to define what the neighborhood is, because this is a neighborhood that wants to be everything. It's got a garage, it's got a couple of residentials across the street, it's got a car wash, got a used car lot, and it's got just kind of a hodgepodge of uses and building types. So it makes it a bit of a challenge when you're talking about trying to, work into a neighborhood. I'll call your attention to the title of the plan that we submitted, Site Plan N35. The N means that we've gone through A through M, and we are on Plan N. We've looked at this particular piece of property many different ways. Initially, to renovate the existing building, fraught with problems, the largest one being smell. Other challenges in that building were just the configuration of it, the shape, the elevations of the ceilings. They jumped all over the place inside. And our clients went through a considerable expense, actually. We have complete elevations and scale drawings of that entire building, which they're now proposing to tear down. But again, it became a bit of a liability from a design and an ownership point of view. I mean, all you needed was one 95-degree day to kick up and have somebody get a whiff of the dog food odor in there. The next thing you know, you've got 35 lawsuits on your hand. So to be prudent, I guess they reeled back reluctantly and looked at what was a marketable solution. So this is what we're proposing. I know there are some comments about the alignment, the configuration. Again, we looked at this several different ways. We tried to break up the buildings into building units that we could do in phases. Again, that's for financing purposes. Just trying to carve off a little bit at a time, not necessarily build this thing all at once. And because it's a rectangular shaped parcel here, we wanted to try to give it as much relief as we possibly could visually. So doing that, we broke it up along Perry Street to give it kind of a serpentine look, jogged all the buildings, as well as curved this driveway coming in to the extent that we could. The other challenge here is the power lines. We wanted to get the buildings as far away from the power lines as we could. So the site pinches in this direction. And to get some green space in the front, some green space between the power lines, and then keep enough space for our parking, our two-way access, and then inside parking. This is kind of the configuration we're left with. If you look at the zoning table that I handed out, we've got 10 spaces more than what's required. And those are down in here. And we looked at this several different ways. This seemed to be the way that made the most sense to us. If you look at the topo of this property, you'll see that it's high on this end, low here, and lower here. So the whole thing kind of slopes in this direction. To get from Perry Street from here to here would have to go across about a 6 or 7 foot grade. It gets better down here. It's about, from here to here would be about a 3 to 4 foot grade. A little deceiving out in the field when you look at it, but that's what it is. As such, this is why we have this entrance where it is. And just to give you, as part of the requirements for filing, we just give you a look at a typical type, a sketch of a typical type unit. Again, this is very preliminary. We know this is a pre-application. Nothing's cast in stone. If I could, I just want to point out a couple of things on the zoning chart. And that's that, first of all, we don't appear to require any variances at this point in time. This would obviously need an interpretation from the building inspector. But as far as the minimum lot area per dwelling unit, according to the calculations, it's 2,500 square feet per dwelling unit. We're at 2,703. Mathematically, this would support 37 units. We're showing 35. I've also, I don't know if you have a copy of the letter that was submitted to the city engineer. I was able to talk to Steve Curran before he retired, just to go over, in general, our approach to the drainage on this particular site. And again, we anticipate that there'll be a reduced amount of runoff from this site with this proposed development. And any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Jerry, if I may for a minute, I know when we did the walkthrough on the site, they talked about the part facing Perry Street, how a lot of it now is open. Yeah.
Right here?
Yeah, I mean, heading down Perry Street, and they're talking about maybe, and I know some of the questions that came up through planning and development was how to address that streetscape. Because a lot of it didn't have any curb cut there. When a building comes in, it cuts back in,
Yeah.
then it comes there. Could you address that just a little bit? Because I know that was one thing that we had some comments on, and I know Tom said they would maybe address that. I know they said they were coming in soon because we met only a couple of weeks ago, but I know that was an issue that I think Mr. Parekas brought up, and I don't know if you had a chance to address any of that.
In terms of what the existing streetscape is, or what's being proposed?
What's being proposed?
Yeah, well, right now what you've got is you've got the building that's right on the property line. It's right at the back of sidewalk. And then you've got a very large curb cut,
That's the
essentially.
part that they're talking about right there.
Right
Because
here.
how it sets back and it's wide open there.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of people parking there now.
I think there are some neighbors using it.
Yeah, a couple of vans that are parked there.
Its initial intent was, you can see the concrete pad here, was to have trailers come in and drop their legs and line up here. Also in the back, they were doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, I think if you even go to the City of Lowell GIS, the photograph they have in the aerial shows you how the property was being used. They've got trailers lined up here and here.
Yeah, because I know that was one of the questions they had about how that would address the streetscape was one of the questions I think Mr. Parekas had.
One of the, just to make a quick distinction, if I could too, on this preliminary layout, is that, again, we kind of went around and around. The definition of front and back, you know, a lot of people determine front as where their front door is. A lot of people determine front as to where the street is. The way we're designing this, these sets of buildings will be, the front is actually on the driveway side. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to cause some separation from Perry. And one of the things that does is it would discourage people from parking on Perry. That we would want anybody visiting the site to come into the site and park where the parking's provided. And just kind of alleviate a lot of traffic up and down parking. I know that if I had a front door here with a walkout this way, you know, everybody would be just pulling up to the front door.
They're going to go the easiest traveled way.
Right. And so we're talking about some sort of a vinyl or cedar fence along here.
Good, good. White, preferably. Yeah.
One other question that came up when we walked the site was, I know those power lines come in now.
Yep.
Could you just address to the other board members about the property that's to the left there? There's some property there, and then there's a decent amount that obviously Tom and them are trying to fix up, but they don't own that property because some things were being dumped in there, and some of it was gated, and sometimes the gate wasn't shut, and certain people had keys to it. And I know there was talk about, what was that new project there, like almost the walkway going through there? Yeah, the Concord River Greenway. Could you just explain to the other board members how basically where your property stops and what's open from your property line till actually the Concord River?
Okay,
You know
well.
what I mean?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The fence you saw out there is right here.
Right.
And this is where the gate was, I believe, to the back of our
Yeah,
property.
because you walked in the parking lot and it was right there, right?
Correct.
It was open and there was some trucks going down there now to service those power lines when we were there, right?
Right. And to the left, it's also paved, I believe.
Correct.
And that's owned by the power company. So you've got the situation at this location here that you've got back-to-back pavement, essentially. And I believe that the owners of this property did have rights there for a while to use that back and forth. So
Your other map shows it better, Jerry.
yeah, the vicinity map.
Yeah, they said they leased it for a period of time.
Yeah.
When the lease was coming up, I remember Tom indicating to us, it was a question we had. They did lease it for a period of time. I think the lease
Yeah, I
was due
don't know
to
if that's
lapse.
still under agreement or not.
Yeah, and I know the question was that lease was coming up, what they were going to do with it was a future issue, right?
Right, and so they don't own it. So basically, again, if I go back to here, where this fence takes a turn is about 10 feet outside the property line.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of space that's actually from that driveway before you get to the river.
That's right.
At first, by driving by, you think it's right next to the river.
Right.
But I mean, if you could just address that open space here, because I know when I walked with the applicant, I didn't believe by driving by quickly that there was that much space between the back of their property line and the Concord River.
It's close to 100 feet.
Yeah.
So,
and that's owned by, I forget who they told us owned that.
Mass Electric,
Mass Electric,
right.
I'm sorry.
And we know that the Greenway does have plans to come in, you know, have walkways through here, with, and they're looking for rights to get out to Perry Street at some point in time, I guess. But yeah, it is kind of deceiving. I think that a lot of people think that this is a
Right to the river.
well, they think it's a manufacturing building, is what it is. As far as I know, this was never a mill, in terms of the true sense of a mill. You know, it was.
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it wasn't using hydropower. They had huge engines in the basement, you know, running equipment. And I think at one point in time they were making furniture or something, weren't they? Yeah. Right. So, you know, it's really what, you know, a manufacturing building that, so it never drew off the Concord River for power.
Now, I know with that future walkway coming through, I know Mr. Topia called me today. He said he couldn't be here tonight, but one of the questions he said was that he told me the applicant wouldn't have any problems with any type of easements there for anybody.
I don't know what Bill said.
That's what he told me. I don't know if he discussed that
No,
with
we
Tom.
said we'd consider it. We'd have
Yeah.
to see where it would
Yeah.
be. We
He
would
said that
consider
that'd be
it.
something he
Yeah.
mentioned to me, and I said, well, I'll raise it at the preliminary if somebody else doesn't. I mean, he said that's something that they'd be willing to consider it, because with that new greenway space going through there, but he said he thinks that they wouldn't have a problem with that, so I just want to throw that out there, because that was communicated to me, and he had asked me if I'd mention that tonight, and I said I would. But as indicated, when we went through there, I know George Parakis, we walked through the building. He said the building structurally wasn't in bad shape. I mean, but the problem was the odor. Luckily, we went through on a cold day, and it's not as bad, but on a warm day,
Yeah.
oh yeah. You don't have, as I told Tom, no offense, you don't have to be inside to smell it. I mean, you can smell it outside. I mean, I know when
Oh,
the other project that you had approved
Yeah, on
across
the other
by
side.
Bradford to the left,
Yeah.
they complained about it, and it was not even by your project.
Yeah,
And then they
that was
complained
way up
about
in
Bradford
Al-
as well.
Yeah, Alton Street, yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, that one they complained about, and they complained about Bradford because they had that stuff that blew up in the,
But you could always
Yeah.
smell the
right.
Old Mother Hubbard
And I know
driving
the letter
by.
that was provided to us tonight, as well as what Tom told us that night, was he had Serv Pro and Service Master go in and said they'll do everything they could to clean it, but they wouldn't guarantee the smell would be gone. So the question was, you do all the work, and then, you sell it to somebody, and then that, then it comes out later, then what type of situations you have on your hand. Because obviously, the first concern was, I think, which the applicant tried to address, was saving the building. And obviously, if there's no guarantee to get that odor out of there, then I don't see how marketability you'd have at all with that project.
They really wanted to do the building, though, initially, when I first met
Yeah,
with
and that's
them.
what Tom indicated to
Yeah.
me. His sister told us the same thing, and it looks like they spent a good deal amount of time and effort trying to do that.
They did, and to be honest with you, when we don't typically do residential work, and that's what attracted us to this project, was the fact that it was going to be a conversion of an existing building. It was a nice challenge, and looked like it was going to be a real fun project, and it was going to be interesting. And then when we get into the building and start looking around, there were a couple of challenges structurally that needed to be overcome, but they could be overcome. There were a couple of other issues with the old power plant that were downstairs that needed to be addressed. Really required a lot of filling inside the building. There were a lot of utility things that needed to be addressed as well before we could really start sinking our teeth into a good design for this thing. But the really overriding thing was what you experienced when you went in there. It's a lot of wood timber in there, just soaked it up. Even the brick, I think, soaked it up.
Yeah, I think that was a comment that Tom or your sister made about how it even got into the brick, and no matter how you washed it, how you got rid of it, they still wouldn't guarantee it'd be gone. No matter what they did to get it out, they said it's basically embedded in the brick. I mean, there's no guarantee anyway they could. They'll do the work, but they're not going to guarantee it's going to be gone.
That's right.
Yeah, which is a
And
tough situation.
quite frankly, I think that we would have had some serious issues ourselves about staying on the project if the decision was made to go forward and turn this in, because the flyers we get from our insurance company, they're primarily just about condominium projects. They say run away essentially, and it was just a huge liability looking everybody in the face there.
Any other board members have any questions? I think that's.
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you plan decks for these units?
Well, it all depends what you mean by deck.
Well, just an
Yeah,
outside
at this,
deck.
again, we haven't fleshed this out totally. And correct me if I misspeak here, but, because I'm not the architect on this one, my partner is. This is what we're looking at. We call this the front, but it's the garage side. And at this point in time, we didn't have any plans to put decks out the back. And we were only going to put some stoops out front with porches, I say front, on the street side.
Oh, like a little farmer's porch.
Right,
Yeah.
out front, and not necessarily connected to the existing sidewalk. We're looking at putting a fence around there.
Okay. Just one other comment I'd like to make.
I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah. Just one other comment. I think maybe you have too many units on this site. It just looks a little dense to me.
It's
And I think
35.
if you drop down the number of units, you'd create a little bit more green space and marry whatever design you come up with into that walkway, that green,
Mm-hmm.
what is it, the greenway access. I think you'd have a better project.
I think because of the expenses that they've incurred to date, I think if they're much like 35
Yeah,
seems to
I
be the number.
understand that. I appreciate
They-
that. I
They
just
kind of
think it-
need to tear it down and do
yeah,
the work.
I think it could
to walk
be
that.
less dense.
I think we could, the zoning would allow 37, Jerry?
Yes.
Yeah, 37, so they cut it down a little, but, you know.
You know, and we looked at putting units down here. It's doable. You know, when you do them like they did on Middlesex, there's a unit, I can't remember the name
You'd
of
have
that.
to line them up again.
Which
Where
one?
they jog the units at an angle on Middlesex Street.
Yeah, Steve Beatty's project on
Yeah.
Middlesex Street.
I mean, we could do something like that down that stretch, but it just seemed to be unmarketable.
That's all I have.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Foley, what is the width of the driveway that you're proposing?
24 feet.
24 feet. And then, I'm just, again, comment of your emergency vehicle turnaround at the end.
Mm-hmm.
The maneuver to even get there, I think, is a little tricky. Obviously, the fire department would have to sign off on that, but I don't know what your radius is to get back there, and I don't know. That's something to think about. But
Yep. No, yeah, we'd have to flesh that through the fire department.
yeah, I think there might be some issues there, and I know you.
I like it better than this one, though.
And I know you mentioned you had a hard time to define the neighborhood, and part of that is, I think, intentional in how we came up with the traditional mixed-use neighborhood, and you just described a traditional mixed-use neighborhood. This is a key site in this area. I just, it would have been nice to see something incorporating the traditional mixed-use intent. Obviously, you'll be before us for a special permit for doing residential in that traditional mixed use, but certainly would have been nice to, and I don't know if anything was explored at all as far as traditional mixed use, some sort of retail and some sort of residential, you know, and I don't know how much of a market there is out there for new construction that way, but was any of that explored at all, or was it just strictly
no,
residential?
Can you speak through the microphone, please, so we can hear you? I'm sorry. Thank you. That way people at home can hear you as well.
Sorry.
That's quite all right.
We did look at the commercial, and we did not see it as a viable situation right there. The residential, we did, once we looked at it in terms of making an enclave, that we could incorporate the housing there. But commercial, there, we did not see a market for any commercial use there.
Sure, well, I guess traditional retail, but nothing, again, nothing was explored. Traditional retail in residential.
Such as?
Some storefronts, something a little bit more. It's a shame that the streetscape of Perry Street couldn't be incorporated, but I understand issues with Perry Street, but.
Perry Street has some
Yeah,
issues, yeah.
because you're really taking that corner and you're putting the backyards along that street.
The automotive uses on Perry Street, you know, they seem to occupy quite a bit of that street that belongs to the city,
Mm.
you know, and they take up a lot. So, you know, but we did not see it as anything where people, commercial, would be profitable there, as opposed to 38 on Rogers Street, where, you know, it seems to be concentrated there. We did not see it.
Right. Well, I'm curious to get the fire department's comments on
One other comment, if I could. That's in an historic district, I mean, the neighborhood preservation district, I guess.
No.
It states that here in our documentation.
You say what?
It states that here in what we have.
It's not in the Fort Hill district.
It's not? If it's not, then all right.
No.
Mr. Chairman, if I may
It states
briefly
that.
comment on that.
ahead.
The site itself is not located in any regulated historic district. For example, it's not in the Fort Hill Park area, but it is in the National Park larger overlay district. It doesn't necessarily require any formal review, but it does mean that if federal or state funds or local funds were ever used on site, it would require a review of some sort. I would like to note, however, that this mill building, or the building itself, is on a Nationally Historic Registered building. I have had conversations with Peter Osella about the site. He has concerns about the loss of the site. Obviously, he understands the reasoning for possibly tearing it down, and understands the commercial viability of the mill structure itself. But he also realizes that anything that would take its place would need a high level of design review and a high level of context review with regards to the Greenway, Perry Street, Rogers Street, and I can further comment on some of that as well. I know, for example, the City of Lowell had in 2003 put together a plan called the Concord River Greenway Neighborhood Plan, I believe, and it did discuss the traditional neighborhood design that could be incorporated into this site and surrounding sites. It's not a plan that's adopted by the city, so there's no formal regulation that's required under under the plan. However, it is a plan that I did encourage the applicants to review, and I definitely encourage the board to review. It's located on our website as well, and that discusses more of the traditional neighborhood design, which I think was one of the intentions of the plan that was provided by DPD tonight. While the plan by DPD is not obviously the final plan by any means, neither is the plan in front of you. It is more for general discussion, just to get the ideas out there of what a traditional design could look like at the level of density that they're promoting. So at this time, I think those are some good general comments that I'd wish the board to take consideration for. Also, in reviewing this internally, access off of Roger Street is a major concern, not only from myself, but also the traffic engineer in the city. Roger Street's a very busy street, especially during rush hour, and limiting the curb cut along that street, especially when you're going to have Perry Street right next to it, as well as access to the Concord River, the proposed access to the Concord River Greenway. That's a high concern. So I just want the board to be aware of that concern as well when they continue to review this plan. I'll refrain from commenting any further right now.
Can I ask a question? What did he say about national park or?
There's an overlay district over
Yeah.
parts of the city. It extends
Along
all the
the
way
rivers.
down Pawtucket Street. It includes, for example, the Burbeck ice cream site. It's a national park. I'm not sure exactly
It's an
what
overlay
it is. It's
district.
an overlay district.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a formal review, but if there's any state or federal funds going into a project, it does require review.
Yep.
Or if there's a curb cut off of a mass highway, which some roads in town are regulated by Mass Highway, it does also require a review. It does allow the national park to provide comments on any project in that area. They're not comments that the applicant needs to adhere to, but they are just general comments about the historic nature of the site. No, this is from Peter Osella. He's from the National Park Service. No, I'm saying that if this project were to use state, federal, or local funds, it would require some form of National Park Service review, like a historic board review. It's related to the funds of the project. This is all privately funded, so it does not require
This is like,
that review. However, this site is also a National Registered Landmark, historic landmark.
it's like, Jerry, the one up on the boulevard that we did. Riverside Street.
Yep.
That's
Yes.
in an overlay district.
Exactly.
Correct.
But I didn't know what was down on the Concord River.
It goes all the way down Lawrence Street, actually. It includes many of the Lawrence Street mill projects.
And so it'd be similar to that.
Exactly. Because the private funds are being used in this case, it doesn't require any formal review, but the National Park Service is allowed to provide comments should they so choose. But in this case, and those comments are strictly just comments. They're not binding by any means. But that overlay district does go all the way down the Concord River, down Lawrence Street. It includes many of the mills down at the other end of Lawrence Street that have, for example, 900 Lawrence Street site. In those cases, they did not provide comments. In this case, they may.
The only thing I want to say about Roger Street, I mean, I grew up in that neighborhood. I drive Roger Street every day, and I know you're from Belvedere, Steve, and I know Tommy's from Belvedere, and Roger Street gets busy on the other side of the bridge, down by the lights, down by the Whipple. That's where it backs up. There was a gas station and a car wash across the street for many years that I used. I never had a traffic problem getting in or out of that, which would be a heck of a lot busier than this site would be. So I don't think there's a real problem on Roger Street at this site. I think you have more of a problem on Perry Street with all the car uses in there. And if we were facing on Perry Street, as Jerry said, people would be parking in the front. It's a narrow street. It's a cut-through. People go, and the speeds in there are pretty good. I think it's more dangerous than Roger Street would be, in my opinion, as one who's traveled that all my life and lived in the neighborhood. So, I mean, I think that's something that the board should consider and take a look at. But I've never seen a backup at that section of Roger Street.
Well, sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I do respect that opinion. I know when I did do the site visit a couple weeks ago, we did get backed up there for a couple of minutes trying to turn into that site coming over the bridge from downtown. That could have just been one circumstance. Obviously, I don't travel that every day. I do travel it occasionally. But even still, the location of your proposed entrance to Perry Street, it's still a public road, and to a proposed greenway entrance project, the close proximity of those three entrances together, eliminating one of those is ideal. That from a transportation planning standpoint, that is an ideal situation to eliminate one of those curb cuts.
You said you had a backup coming across the bridge from the city?
If you
to go left?
yes.
You'd have the same?
It was more traffic coming the other way. We were trying to turn left into the site.
You would have had the same problem going left on Perry Street. So, I mean, I don't
Right,
think...
but at least in that case, if
there's no
you have
backup there.
multiple cars trying to turn at three different entrances, you wouldn't,
Well,
you're
I
trying
mean,
to limit the backup.
I don't know. I travel it every day, and I haven't seen a backup there.
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to echo the comments of Mr. Lockhart with regard to the density of the project. I think it's too dense. I'd like to see fewer units. I'd also, I think it would be nice if there were, not as many units connected. I think the connected units can create issues and problems. You have 7 units and 6 units connected. It'd be nice if the townhouses were limited, the clusters were less than that. And I know it's an economic issue. You're trying to increase the profitability of this project by putting more units in there, but our charter here is to help develop the neighborhoods and keep the neighborhoods livable. And I think that the density of this is an issue. And part of the reason is, can you flip the chart to the site? Yeah, part of the reason is this appendage on the end. We got another appendage, right? That land area is included in the land area per dwelling unit calculation, yet it really doesn't do anything to make the units themselves, separated and
But it will
more
for the
livable.
Greenway when they want an easement across it, so that it's open space, because they want to cross it.
Well,
to
that's
walk
not
on
that's
over.
that's not my issue, though. I'm
No, I
just
know
trying to
that,
tell you
but,
what I
I
think
mean,
what I
it's-
think of the project. If you want
I-
my feedback, then I'm happy to give it.
But
So that's my thought. And the other thing is, could you flip to the neighborhood chart where you show the rest of the neighborhood? So, talking about neighborhood character and keeping it within neighborhood character, if you take a look at the other streets there, and I know there's some issues on Perry Street, but can I borrow that for a second?
Oh, sure.
Pleasant Street and Concord Street.
You said issues on Perry Street here, but if you look at Concord Street here, or even the residential area of Perry Street, if you were to drive down that street, you'd say this is a pretty densely packed neighborhood. These houses are quite close together. But if you look at the project you're proposing, I mean, this looks like there's all kinds of land in comparison. So I think it's with regard to roominess of the project and the density of the neighborhood, I think it's too dense and it's out of character with the rest of the neighborhood.
But I think if you look down Perry Street, I think there's four residential buildings next to the church, right? And the rest is, on the left side going down is Mass Electric, and there's commercial use, and there's a parking lot there, and there's cars.
These are all residential buildings
up
here, right?
there.
Right.
I'm
Well, I
talking
mean,
Perry
it's
Street.
one street over.
Yeah, I'm talking
Just trying to point out the fact that this neighborhood here
Yeah.
is pretty densely packed. If you were to drive down the street, you would say this is a very dense neighborhood.
Yeah.
But when you look at it on an overview of, like this map, these houses are quite roomy compared to what you're proposing here, which says to me that this is too densely packed and out of character with
Well,
the neighborhood.
They look roomy because they're on separate lots, but they might be 4 families. How do we know, the number of units in there? I mean, that's what the zoning calls for. Now, I know what you're saying, so they'll have to go back and look at it, but,
Sure.
When you do look at those houses on Fort Hill Avenue, on Concord, as you drive down them, a lot of them, those people are not able to park on
No
their own
parking.
lots. They're actually parking on the street.
Sure.
Because, they may have land in their backyard. They have no way,
To
the
get to it.
house is situated such that they have no way to get to their backyard, so therefore, they're forced to park on the street. And having worked in this city all these years, I know snowstorms, it's a disaster area on those streets there. So, yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, sir, when you're saying, well, they look like it. But in our case, we're gonna be like a self-contained area, where they're gonna be parking. That's why we're trying to get them off of Perry Street, get them off that street.
Mhm.
Because, under the best of circumstances, the industrial uses there, or commercial uses, are using quite a bit of Perry Street. The other thing about that strip of land that goes off, like that.
You might want to use the microphone just so you'll be silent on TV.
Is that one of the things I've noticed in these more concentrated areas, people have no place to walk their dogs, walk their animals. That strip becomes an area for the tenants to utilize for they're playing for the children. They're off the street if they want to jog, walk their pets. So, we're actually taking away from the utilization of what I see in other neighborhoods that people aren't picking up after their pets and they're parking their cars on the street. We're trying to avoid all of that on this site. So in essence, that does become useful to this project.
Sure, I think that's probably a good point. It's useful. I still think it's too densely packed. As Mr. Lockhart said, I think you'd have a better project if you took some of the units out and separated them out of the 7 clusters into something small.
Go ahead, Jay.
Just real quick, Mr. Foley, looking at this, were you proposing snow storage in a dumpster or a trash pickup?
It'll be taken care of by the condominium association. It'll be a curb internally. So they just
Okay.
come by and they pick up the barrels at each unit
Okay.
and off they go.
And where's snow,
Inside
where's
the
the
house,
snow
Jerry.
storage?
Pardon me?
the trash is inside the house.
Right.
Okay, and where's the snow storage?
Well, we got all kinds of space down here for snow storage if we need it. We'd probably pick it up with a huff
you-
and just bring it down.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you talk about plowing it from up
Yep.
above and bringing it down there.
One of the things I neglected to point out was that typically what you'd see in this type of a townhouse configuration, just again to save money, is you have the side-by-side garage doors and you have one width of pavement for that. And again, to try to get the green space up and have people, feel this ownership of a piece of land in here, we alternated the garage door so there's a strip of green between each driveway. So there is, for the driveways themselves, there's storage for snow on both sides. And then just the main road here would have to get plowed out.
Just a couple of quick comments. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to speak to any of the neighbors yet about the project, or, no?
We will, though.
Yeah,
Before we
obviously,
come
at some
back.
point, they can either be your best resource or your worst enemy, so I'd certainly encourage you to do that if you haven't done that already. It'd be nice to see also some sort of recreation area. You've got quite a few units in here. If you could set aside some recreation area, other than, obviously, we got this overflow parking, and that's all paved, but if you had some green space that people could actually utilize with some sort of a recreation area, that's, I think, would add to the overall project. Just a question, the height you're proposing is 45 feet, is that correct?
At this time, yeah, only because we haven't finished the architecturals yet.
Okay.
It's probably going to end up more like 42, 43 from the garage side. The intent on the, if I go back to this, well, the engineering hasn't been done yet, but this would be, the land out here would be higher, so you would only see the second, the second level and the next level up. Right, and then it would be stepped down in the back. So that from...
Is it built in?
Yeah, so from Perry Street, we take the edge off the height, so it looks considerably shorter from the Perry Street side than it does from the garage side.
How would that compare to the residences across on Perry Street?
It'll be, I believe it'll be shorter. As a matter of fact, the residences on, right here, there'll be 3 fully exposed stories. So we'd have a similar situation. You'd see, this space here would be where the living room and the kitchen are, then bedrooms, and then built-out attic, perhaps.
All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I have no further questions. I think I addressed the ones I had earlier when the presentation started. So. I know one other thing I think of it, when we did meet, the talk was that they would meet up with the neighborhood association.
Yeah.
Told them basically there was the ones in the Fort Hill area they could do. Also, if they want to speak with the Belvedere Association, I told them that the old association was dissolved and they created a new one, and that one meets up at the Sullivan Middle School.
Sullivan School, I think they meet it.
Yeah, it meets there because actually you see it in the advertisements with all the other neighborhood associations, and I think it's Miss Joyce who runs those up there.
I don't know who heads it now, though. Do you know who it is, Gary?
Who's that?
Who heads the Belvedere one now?
I think her name is Kelly Joyce.
Kelly
Yeah,
Joyce.
it's in the paper.
Yeah, I think that's the woman's name. I think I've seen it up there. Actually, it was advertised the last time when I think the person from the city was up there for the recycling. They were making all the other neighborhood stops and mentioned who was going to be up there and a couple other things. But yeah, they have it right at the Sullivan School, same place where they do the peach. Right in there. But I think her name was on the advertisement. I knew what they did is they resolved the old Belvedere Association and created a new one. And so when we mentioned that, we spoke with, and they said basically they'd be happy to look at the people from Fort Hill as well as Belvedere.
Well, we'd contact the planning department, get the names.
We can get that information to you, I know, because that's usually advertised in the paper whenever they have their monthly meetings.
Right. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we do have the new contact. Party Safari, our neighborhood planner, has already met with the neighborhood group at least once, and we can get that to the
We'll do
applicant,
that.
not a
We'll
problem.
contact
Yep.
James and get the names.
Would appreciate that.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. That completes our new business for pre-application matters. Moving along, we have an A&R report under old other business. James, you can fill us in on that?
Actually, I do have a report. I just forgot to print it out for you tonight.
Okay.
It's complete. I'll have it in the next packet for the next meeting.
Okay. No problem.
It's complete and up to date.
We have notices from abutting towns. Any of the planning board members have any questions or concerns about the notices that we received from some of the other towns?
Make a motion to place them on file, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye. 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 Any general correspondences at this point in time? Hearing none. After that.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did include, it's just information about upcoming training possibilities that are being held.
Oh, yeah, it was,
I just wanted those to be more for your review.
Out at Holy Cross, correct, okay.
Yes, it's a statewide organization that puts on
Impact.
regular trainings. Some of them may be pertinent to what the planning board may look for. Or you may, if you're interested in attending one of those or a couple of those, let me know. I'm not sure if we have money in the planning board budget to send people, but if we do, then we can obviously send you. If not, you're welcome to attend on your own. But I just want to make sure you're aware of that, just for your own information.
I know I've attended a couple of these in the past with other planning board members. We went to Northern Essex Community College in Havel.
Yeah.
Some of them were very beneficial. I believe at the time it was Mr. Zaroulis, myself.
I was,
Yeah, that's right, and you
it
were
was
there.
about A&R.
Yeah, that was very,
And
and
it was
actually,
very good, yeah.
actually, a lot of the court case decisions and a lot of the A&R was all down the Cape because of the way all the land's shaped differently with all the
Yeah.
islands and stuff. But all the case law was all Cape case law because of the unique shapes of all the lots. You know, some of them being the peninsulas and everything else. And So a lot of the case laws that they gave us was very helpful. And I know a couple of times, one other time I couldn't make it because I had a conflict when I was in law school. I know that Arthur Hammer went a couple of times with Mr. Zaroulis. And what they did sometimes, if we went, or somebody else went, we tried to get extra materials and bring them back, which was always helpful if they had extras there, and we'd pass them out to other board members, or we'd make another copy. They had no problem with us copying, and they said, yeah, you know, share them if we don't have enough. They didn't have any copyright violations at all, so they'd be more than happy to. So if people do have the opportunity, sometimes they are very helpful. Some of them, I think, we've had in the past concentrated, like they say, zoning, some was on subdivisions, and sometimes they were helpful to update, and also you get this network with some of the other board members from different towns to see what they're going through. And sometimes it's nice to have a contact, just to pick up the phone and call somebody who's going through a certain situation that we're considering, like when we considered, like really like that Mullen law we addressed, to call other board members to say, what's your feedback on it? So sometimes they're helpful.
And sorry, Mr. Chairman, I can comment just a little bit further. You bring up the point of the Mullins rule and just training in general. I do have a request into the law department to just get their feedback on the Mullins rule. I also have a request in there just to get some feedback on what the pending cases are in the courts from the planning board. And I believe they are also looking into putting together some form of a just general training session regarding special permit site plan review, more for the new members of the board, but just to refresh the board every couple of years. It's always good to do something like that.
Well, especially
I know they're
sometimes if
looking
some
into that
case
as
law
well.
comes down and something has
Exactly.
changed, they might want to bring it to our attention, and so therefore, when we deliberate on certain cases, we can try to keep our comments and, or at least our issues to what obviously we know the courts are looking at.
Exactly, and just rendering a decision for projects, it's always good to get refreshed.
Because I know
on.
sometimes as a board member, you might sit here and think something, but you don't come out and actually say it, and then when it gets appealed later, they'll say, well, you didn't address that even though you're thinking it.
Right.
So sometimes I know, sometimes it's nice to address issues, sometimes you might say too much, so sometimes it's nice to know what you should comment on publicly and what you shouldn't. I mean, sometimes you're thinking it, you know, it's like the teachers say you're thinking it, but if you don't say it, then they can't review it later. Okay. So saying that, we're moving along. I think next we have the zoning board of appeals matters. These are notices that are hereby given to the City of Lowell Zoning Board of Appeals. We'll hold a public hearing on February 12th, 2007 at 6:30 p.m. And those meetings will be held here in the City Council chambers. Again, these matters come before the planning board just for our review to the to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So we just address these matters and send our comments to them, and they deliberate when they have their public hearings, as well as whatever comments we may pass along. So the first matter on is Francis and Deborah Grimshaw. This is a variance for a traditional single family. The petition to maintain the existing carport without the required front and side yard setback and insufficient distance from the structure. We do have a copy of the plan, and as indicated, this is on 612 Beacon Street.
I have a question relative to this. Maybe James, if you could. I got a question how this came about. I went by here today, and what that building is, that it's existing metal garage on the front, is a portable building that's, that was put in place right next to the house. There's virtually no space between the house or the fence. And, it can be removed at will, but when you do something like that, don't you need a permit to do it?
I think they said they did it without knowing they needed a permit, and then they found out they needed it.
And then they found, all right.
So
that's how it came
Yeah,
about.
I think, I don't mind jumping in, James, if I'm wrong. I think in the letter that the applicant wrote, I think I remember reading that somewhere today. I think it's indicated, failure to obtain a permit was not intentional, as we were under the impression that since it was not a permanent structure, a permit was not needed. We both have lived here for a long family time in the history in the city of Lowell.
I read that.
And so I think that might have been, they put it up and they realized it. I think the woman who indicates it in her narrative states that husband suffers from severe back injury due to a work-related incident, and they put that there. So I know there's, but as indicated, if you look, it's right on the property line, which I think is what one of the concerns is.
Oh, it's right, it's right up against the house.
And I believe there's a
against
picture
the
there too. It
property.
looks like it's been put right in there. I mean,
Yeah, there's virtually no room. I sympathize with the applicant and the situation there, but I don't really think we can allow things like that to happen and those things to be maintained, where there's just no space there for it, really. So I make a motion to deny.
I'll second.
Motion is made in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, on the motion, you know, I agree.
It's ridiculous.
You know, it's right on the property line, so it's a precedent that we don't want to set. You know, the applicant claimed a hardship, and you know, I don't know how the neighborhood feels about it. It almost is something that, you know, we might want to hear what they have to say. But so you know, obviously the zoning board's going to do what they want anyway.
Yeah,
but,
and I think they'll have the
in
benefit
the
of
light
listening to the neighbors.
you know,
Right.
and
Yeah,
not
they will.
wanting to set a
And if that's the
precedent,
case, fine. I
not
mean,
wanting to
I
set a
agree.
precedent of doing that, I think I agree with.
I mean,
with
as
Mr.
indicated,
Lockhart.
you know, I don't know how permanent the structure is, if it can be moved easy or not. Whether after hearing from the applicant and the neighbors, once they have a public hearing, whether they can say, you know, once the hardship is gone, you can remove it. You know, that was something I was trying to think through today when I was reading this.
Yeah,
And then the question is,
that's a
how do you police
possibility.
that?
Right.
You know,
How do you police
the
it?
situation of, do you sell it, or if the person passes away, do you just move and leave it there, and this person comes in, and really, is the city gonna go up and say, well, remember years ago, you put this here, and you know?
Right.
I know the intention is to help an elderly person who has a handicap, I understand that, but also, as you say, when it's right on the property line, and I know by looking at the zoning chart, there's a couple of other dimensions that they're off by, so, I would go along with the motion to disapprove.
And there also may be some opportunity to move that to another area on the lot, because it appears that there's a larger area that
That's
not
true.
developed on the other side of the property, so they may have to
that's true, there
reconfigure
is.
that so as not to impinge on the rights of this neighbor right here.
There is, yeah.
So the motion's made and, to deny, and all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes yes, so the motion carries 5-0 to deny. Moving along, the next matter is Marty Ramos, 524 Westford Street, a special permit and variance. This is a traditional two-family neighborhood, which is, as indicated, 524 Westford Street, to allow a home occupation, a lawyer's office with a freestanding sign without the required parking. This is on the corner of Westford and Birch Street. And so she's looking for the sign, I think, and they need the, as well as on the special permit to put the lawyer's office in a residential area.
Mr. Chairman, I
Go
went up,
ahead, Mr.
I went
Chairman.
by this on Saturday as well as I was making my rounds, and you know, it's a very residential neighborhood there, and there was something in the application about there being a precedent for this, but I drove up and down the street, I couldn't see anything else that would have set a precedent for it. There's absolutely no parking. I mean, that
Right.
street, that side street is very crowded. You know, I think by doing this, you basically make it a business, and again, we're allowing the neighborhoods to deteriorate, so I would make a motion that we recommend denial of that.
Just on discussion on that, I agree with you. I think once, you know, you have a low office there, you're gonna have people coming and going. I
You
mean,
need
and
to
adds to it. I
provide
mean,
for it.
I'm very familiar with the area since I grew up on the street next one on Robin Street. I know that whole side. I knew everybody who lived on all those streets, because in that neighborhood up there, we were always a close neighborhood. We all walked up the same Margaret School, and everybody came from Pine Street and Westford Street, and it is a tight neighborhood. You know, it was a very tight neighborhood. I think, like, I agree with you, to set the precedent on
You
here.
gotta provide some parking.
You know, with no parking at all. I mean, but, you know, it's in a residential neighborhood, and I believe you should keep the residential neighborhood there.
I'll second the motion. I don't
And
think
and Mr. Chairman, also under discussion, under home occupation by our code is allowed as of right, if it doesn't produce any customers or client trips to the occupation. When they need the special permit is when it's gonna generate some client activity in the area, so that's why they needed the permit, number one. There's no parking, as you said, so I certainly would recommend denial as well. I remember speaking with a building inspector specifically on home occupations, and he said there's very few in the city of Lowell because of these issues, so I'd recommend denial.
Okay. So, chair votes in denial, I believe. All in favor? It's denial, I think.
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carries 5-0 and against. Moving along, the next matter is Mike's Signs, care of Albert Jimenez. This is a special permit for sign in a regional retail on 1148 Bridge Street to install internally illuminated wall sign at Pastilio's Restaurant. I believe they're looking to put a sign on the window, I think it looks like in the
Looks
package.
like it's going right above the window.
Yeah,
Well,
which is
Chairman,
on Bridge Street.
Must
Mr.
be an
Chairman,
artist's rendition right here.
So I went by this also on Saturday, and they all now have a plastic sign draped over the building. But the thing that struck me is, you know, it's a restaurant. It looks like it's got 9 or 10 tables in it with 4 seats at a table. And right next door, there's another restaurant with 6 booths in it. And I think I counted 9 parking spaces. in this. It's on Bridge Street, right
Yeah, I
next to the CVS.
Oh, when you see this,
Oh,
oh,
in
okay,
there,
okay,
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 all
yeah, I know
right,
what
It
you
used to
mean.
be
it's
a
moving.
bottle return or something like
All
that.
right,
Oh, yeah.
okay, I know
And,
where it is.
yeah.
That's what I thought.
So, you know,
Couple
internally
little
illuminated sign normally wouldn't be such a big deal, but I'm wondering, you know, where are people gonna park and come to this restaurant? It's very crowded and congested unless they've made, you know,
It's not the issue.
parking off-site someplace. I don't know, I would be, I'd suggest that I'd have a hard time voting for an internally illuminated sign when there's no place for people to park.
The issue is the sign. It's
Yeah, I mean, we have to,
what's before us.
yeah, I don't know how they get by with the parking,
Well, I suppose just for, by way of a comment, if we were going to say the sign, we'd recommend approval on it. We should perhaps put a comment that they should explore whether they have the proper parking to maintain this facility.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
okay. Do you wanna make that in the form of a motion, Mr. General?
Well, I would prefer almost to say that we took no action on it
Is there a way?
in hopes that we could get more information on the parking. So I would move that we take no action and request that the ZBA determine if the appropriate parking is provided for this restaurant.
I'd second that.
Okay, discussion, Mitch, you have a question?
Well, DPD used to have a sign person.
Do we still have that, James?
Yes, Diane Trad
I know she was
reviews
busy
all
with the Winterfest.
signs. She's been pretty busy with the Winterfest and grant
Well, I'm
proposals.
just
and
thinking there might be
she-
a way to,
She has us on her radar. I spoke with her today
Yeah.
about
Did she have any
the
concerns
ZBA
with this,
packet.
or-
she's only looking at signs though, correct?
She generally just does not like internally illuminated signs and doesn't feel it's a good practice to promote those in the city. Only very certain circumstances should an internally illuminated sign be used. Just because of the sheer nature of those signs, they are very bright. They're
Okay.
would like to,
that's
that's essentially what she'd likely promote some form of a similar design or size or shape and style, but different lighting for a sign like
Light or
this.
something.
Spotlight, or there's other ways to do, they're technically not internally illuminated, but there's other ways to do a sign like this one with light projecting behind it, for example, or cutting out the letters differently so that you only see the letters of the establishment, not just a gleaming internally illuminated sign, for example. There's actually quite a bit of technology out there for signage that can be done a little bit less imposing on the surrounding neighborhood.
Yeah.
Not to say that this is,
The
but
Board of Appeals deals with signs more often than we do, but
Right.
maybe it'd be helpful for us to get information about that type of technology that they're really
Certainly.
looking at. 'Cause
Yeah, I think
when
it
we get
would
these
be, and-
petitions for
and,
internally
Yeah.
illuminated signs or marquee signs or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it
So
might be
I would
helpful.
support the motion,
I'll
but,
certainly put that together.
delay doing anything until we see something from the sign lady or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So just backing up, the motion was to take no action, Mr. Gentleman, on this until we get more information?
That's right, and
Okay. And that motion has been
Including the
seconded?
sign.
Okay.
and encourage them to determine if
Okay.
the proper
Just
parking
want to make sure I got it
is
correct. Okay.
available.
So the motion been made and second, all in favor?
I-
Chairman, may
Sure.
I just ask, this going before the zoning board of appeals on the 12th?
Yeah.
So, for us to get additional information at our next meeting to comment on it, is that?
No,
Did I
for
miss
this
that?
petition, I don't think it's gonna help
Yeah,
us. I'm
okay.
just talking about for Future reference.
Future reference, yeah.
I think it's saying that right now, we don't have enough to act on this properly, and hopefully, the information we can get, we can use for future references. Sure. And then, I think what Joe might be getting at, with that information that we get, then will give us more ability to address the concerns when they come in the future.
Right.
You know, and to say, you know, per this review standard, request this, instead of just saying, well, give it to the signed review person. Instead, that way, we can say, well, because of these reasons, this is what they like, what they don't like, and I think it'll give us some idea of where they're coming from, instead of just saying refer to them. You know, that way, we can have some input in regards to what they like, what they don't like, and the reasons behind it, and then make it sound like we know what we're doing. So therefore, the motion carries 5-0 for insufficient action on this point in time. The next matter is Peter Tia on 278 Branch Street. This is a repetitive petition. This is a neighborhood business. This is a repetitive petition previously denied on July 24th, 2006 to operate a restaurant without the required parking. Just to note a little background, I got a call about 3 weeks ago from a friend of the applicant and asked if I could possibly go up there and take a look at the project, and I told him I would. So I made arrangements to go up there and look at the project. The reason why the friend called me, because the applicant wasn't very good in speaking English, and they indicated to me that what happened was, if you look at the plan, which is in the packet, the applicant now already owns a restaurant on Bridge Street, on Branch Street. If you look up on the locus, the project that he's requested now is where the laundromat is. If you come in from Middlesex Street onto Branch, if you go by Branch Street, there's a little variety store there. Where that variety store is, on the end of that variety store, there's a little restaurant there now. This gentleman who leases that space, he has that little restaurant now. So he wants to move his business, because his lease is expiring there within the next 6 months, and he wants to put it into this new laundromat. Where he is now, the only parking he has is on Branch Street. So now, by going to the laundromat, I had the opportunity to go into the Branch Street business, and he showed me that area now, which he has, and it's just a few booths. So we had the opportunity to go into the laundromat place that has been closed, and he purchased that. By walking outside, we did notice that he had all these parking spaces to the right. And if you look on Dover Street, there's also public parking there. And actually, if you look across the street, where the liquor store is, to the left of the liquor store there's actually public parking there. So I spoke with the gentleman about the concern, and what was relayed to me through his translator, per se. He understood English, but he wasn't that fluent in it. Was when he went before the Zoning Board of Appeals before, with the language communication, he never told them that he had the existing business, and he was just trying to relocate the business. So they were concerned about the two different businesses being there, where basically now it would be, he's just moving the one restaurant to the other area. So he already bought this laundromat, he's closed the laundromat down, the laundromat now is vacant, so he's hoping to move the business from one location to the other location. As a result of that, I spoke with one of the Zoning Board of Appeals members, and they told him that basically, when they came before them, they never knew that he had that business and was trying to relocate the business. They thought it was a whole new business going in, and that was one of the concerns. And they said that basically he had a little bit of a problem with communicating to the board members, and it was recommended to him this time is hopefully have somebody with them who could hopefully translate a little better to him. So basically, that was the insight I have, and I got a call and said, could you come up and look at it? And I said, yeah, so I made an appointment to go up there with him, and I said I'd be more than happy to look it over, and you can let me know what your concerns is. Obviously, it's a repetitive petition, and I told him that, you're gonna have to need new guidelines to come in on repetitive is usually what they look at. So what can you let me know that was done before? And then he explained to me they weren't informed of the new business just trying to be located. I did speak with a ZBA member, and they told me that's correct. When it came before them, they were not aware of it being changed, where now he has no off-street parking, and by picking this up, he would have the off-street parking. So that's basically the only comments I have on this, because I had the fact to go up there and look at it at the applicant's request, so I said I would go up there and meet with him and He's hoping to put his business here in, and then let his lease terminate where he is now, next to that little variety store. And he doesn't think his business will be much bigger. He's only gonna add, I think he said, one more booth, but he would have a lot more square footage inside of this building. And he would have more parking. So my main concern, obviously, up there was the parking. And I told him that before he went up, because I know where the area is, a little tight there coming from Middlesex Street, and until Bridge Street starts to the right. And then he also told me, in the back of the building, if you look, he could pick up that spot 7 and 8 if he had to. And he could also make that an entranceway if need be, because he owned that land in the back. And I said, well, that's something you have to consider. But he had that extra parking, so.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yep.
I may briefly comment, this is a repetitive petition, and following the repetitive petition process, this would have to come in front of the board as the next step. So the board commenting on the repetitive petition, whereby they may actually have it as part of a public hearing process, I just caution the board at making a report and recommendation to the ZBA at this time, because this project will be in front of the planning board at a future date through a public hearing process. You're obviously, if you want to make a comment, you're welcome to, but I just caution you at making some form of a recommendation either way in this case.
I'm just commenting on whether the information that was given to us in the past has been changed since the first time, so whether it should come back as repetitive. Whether I did, I said, obviously, if it comes back in the future, it's one thing. The first question would be repetitive. They have to come back because usually something has changed. And that's basically what I tried to explain to the other person is, if there's new circumstances that arose, then maybe it should be allowed, then people consider that when it comes back. I said we would recommend to, one way or another, to the ZBA, then the ZBA would either allow it to come back, and then most likely it'd probably come back before us anyways. But the first step would be whether it does come, gets approved as repetitive, and what's changed from the first plan or the recommendation to the new plan.
So at this point, this is moving forward with the ZBA.
As repetitive petition.
As repetitive petition. If this is approved by the ZBA, they have to come back to us with
The same repetitive petition request as part of a public hearing, and then go to the ZBA, in this case, I'd imagine, for their required variance, which it sounds like is what they're going to be need in this case for parking.
For the parking. I'm
Right.
just wondering why it's going there first, coming back here, and then going back there. Shouldn't it just be coming here first and then going there?
For repetitive petition, there's no required process.
Sounds like he's got an extra step, though.
Yeah,
seems
it
that
is
way,
an extra
doesn't
step. I always try to encourage people to come to the planning board first and then just do the repetitive petition and variance together. With that said, that just didn't happen in this case, but it's not a required process to go either way. Obviously, logistically, it makes more sense to come to the planning board prior to going to the ZBA if the ZBA is the final granting authority.
So with that being said, I'd probably recommend we take no action on this until the public hearing comes before us on the repetitive petition.
I agree.
So I'll make that as a motion.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes yes. That concludes the zoning board of appeals materials. Any of the board members have any further comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wondered if we could have James talk to the city manager at the next meeting and ask him to leave the heat on when he leaves the building next time. Gary and I are going to get a little
Saving money
Polaris
is one
space heater over here for the
I
next
think I
meeting.
spotted the thermostat up there. If I give you a boost, maybe we can hit it.
I'll look into that. I'll definitely make a.
James
make
and
a
I were
comment.
checking the windows. We thought they
Yeah.
were open.
One other
purposely
matter
had my
I
jacket.
have before we adjourn is, I know the next meeting is scheduled for the Thursday, which is February 22nd, because it's on the holiday, is on that Monday, so don't meet that Monday. And I know on that meeting night, one of the board members out of town is unavailable. I did speak to James about the meeting that night, and we have no public hearings scheduled for that night, and nothing's come in, correct, James?
Correct. I have nothing right now. The deadline for an agenda item, though, is roughly the 12th, the Friday before the meeting.
Yeah.
So something could come in between now and then. At the same time, I've been trying to encourage people just to understand that it's already a 4-member board, and you may want to have a 5-member board for whatever you bring in front of the board.
Due to that, my concern is, my children have addressed me whether maybe going away for a couple of days, so I told them I'd double check with what was on the agenda, and since there's nothing on the agenda, I wouldn't want to make a commitment to them and then not show up here that night. So since we have nothing scheduled for public hearing, I was thinking of maybe postponing that meeting, and then this meeting, at the next meeting would be March 5th. I'll let the board members have any concerns on that. I mean, if we had any public hearings, then obviously I'd be here. But since we have nothing scheduled.
So you're talking about canceling that meeting or moving it? Just
Cancel
canceling
it,
it,
the 22nd.
putting everything over to the
Yeah,
next
because
day.
what happens is, then we only come in the 25th, the 22nd, and then our next meeting is only the March 5th due to the fact, because we're already on a Thursday, we come in the following Monday. So we're really only 10 days to the next meeting.
Fortunately, in this case, I don't think, if the board is comfortable with that, there's no public hearing scheduled. There's one public hearing, a repetitive petition, for March 5th right now, and that deadline is closed. So really, it's up to the board's discretion to determine whether or not they're willing to cancel the February 22nd meeting. Just keep in mind, if you do cancel that meeting and something does come up that's pressing, that will be on the March 5th meeting. Of course, the benefit is that it's only 10 days later because it's a Thursday meeting on February 22nd because of the Monday holiday. But again, it's up to the board to determine whether or not they wish to formally cancel that meeting.
Okay. Board members have any questions or concerns about that?
I'd support that.
All right, then I request that we cancel that meeting, we go to March 5th, okay?
So we're gonna cancel, that's canceled
Yeah, the
officially?
February 22nd, okay.
I won't be here.
Okay, you can't be here on March 5th? Okay.
I can't be here.
All right. Just be aware that he can't be here on the 5th, he's out of town, so. But, so we'll meet again on March 5th. Okay, at this point in time, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Before
Sorry.
we adjourn, we had discussed last meeting
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
regarding the NEMCOG.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And thanks for reminding me of that, Jerry. I know on NEMCOG, they have an position for alternate that's available. And I know when I mentioned it, not prior to the last meeting, if anybody would be interested in taking that appointment. I know, Jerry, did you show some interest in that? You still willing to take an appointment on that matter? We have that in the form of a motion?
I'll make that motion that we,
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we hereby, motion's made and second to appoint Mr. Jerry Fischett as an alternate to the NEMCOG board. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I know Rich goes there now, and I think he had some discussion with you, telling you where it meets and how to get there.
Wednesday the 21st at 7 is the next meeting, so we can go in.
Yeah, usually they're pretty helpful to give you out the local stuff and what's going on in our city as well as the regional, because we always get comments in our packet anyways on what's going on with those.
I'll also send a note to Beverly Woods, who's one of the primary contacts over at NIMCOG, about Jerry
here for a
taking
while.
over. Yeah, she has been. Yeah,
She was
she's a
here
great
when I was on the
contact.
board.
She's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, she's been here for a long time. Actually, that, the young woman who used to work for them is the one who's that little park is mentioned up by this site, by the river in Concord, huh? No, do you know, when we looked at this thing tonight, Mother Hubbard, when you go straight over to Concord, I wanna say her name was, I wanna say Dubliner, but it wasn't Dubliner, it was very simple to that.
Oh, yeah,
She used to work for NEMCOG, and that little public park is named after her.
Oh, the little one by the
Yeah, when you go over the bridge to the left,
there's a restaurant.
yeah, I can't think of her name right now, it escapes me, but she used to work for Northern Middlesex Council of Governments back then, and that's why they named it after her. Actually, that was when, Mr. Conan, I think, was for Division of Planning and Development at the time, he knew her, and then they made that little dedication for her. Yeah, and I remember she passed away. Joellen Dublin, I think her name was, yeah, and that little park is named after her, but she was, yeah, yeah, so. So take a motion to adjourn?
so moved?
All in favor, say aye. We adjourn. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.